35 years ago, various kinds of evil spirits suddenly appeared from the Dark Continent. Demons who began attacking people and destroying everything in their path were invincible. For humanity, this seemed impossible. Due to the general demon attack, people called this time the disappearance of the world. Everything around was burning with fire and being destroyed. Yet there were people who fought back against the monsters. They took up various weapons. For example, one of the warriors used a fiery spear to defeat a monster. To reclaim the stolen territory, all humanity united. Scientists from around the world spent 20 years studying the characteristics of demons and discovering magic. The man with the fiery spear managed to hit the monster and finish it off. The monster began to suffocate and eventually turned into a puddle. Simple magic was only a way to prolong life. Humanity needed much greater power. Therefore, humanity focused on natural phenomena. Humanity was able to find the answer to the question of how to gain colossal power and defeat the monsters. In the 435th year, according to the Holy Calendar, humanity finally discovered the spirit. People watched the girls with admiring looks as they flew straight ahead. There were 5 of them in total. The power of spirit magic obtained through contracts with contract spirits far surpasses the power of ordinary magic. Thus, humanity was finally able to drive the demons back to the Dark Continent. In a small village, people gathered and looked at a boy named Faye Bonnet. Since early childhood, great hopes were placed on him. He was a very talented boy. The boys threw fireballs at the girl. The girl fell to the ground and tried to cover herself. One of the boys addressed the girl, called her a newbie, and said that she was forbidden to use magic. The girl covered herself with her hands and began to scream that she was in pain. She asked her attackers to stop. The girl heard someone cast the water wall spell and covered herself with it. She looked up and saw a dark-haired boy. Faye Bonnet stood right in front of the girl and extended his hand toward her tormentors. He said that bullying is low. One of the boys named Bram poked Faye and growled her name. He turned his head aside and saw that all his other friends had run away. Other boys approached them. They pointed fingers at Faye, saying that he was a trembling and terrifying mage. The second boy was frozen with admiration at his appearance. The boy who launched fireballs at the girl frowned upon hearing that the fairy was considered a gifted child. Bram remembers how Faye showed his sister his abilities. The girl was delighted, and Faye said that she could also do anything if she studied well. Bram looked at his brother and sister. He was dissatisfied. Suddenly, a girl approached him and said that if he envied Faye, he could try to do something similar himself. The boy only loudly called her name. Bram got angry because all his sisters talked only about Faye. That is why he did not like Faye. Bram pointed his hand at Faye and began to speak about him contemptuously. Faye used magic to throw his brother into the air. Bram screamed. Faye decided that there was no point in comparing himself to Bram or other children of the same generation. The girl who was just attacked turns to Faye, wipes her tears, and thanks her brother for saving her again. Faye stretched out his hand and helped the girl to stand up. She climbed onto his back and the brother carried her home. Passers-by watched this. They were impressed by how Faye treated his sister. The Bonnet family, having just received the title of Duke, must pass it to the elder brother Faye. The Bonnet family belongs to the 7 influential families of the Kingdom of Armando. Due to Faye's colossal magical power, which exceeds even adults, and his skillful ability to keep it under control, he is called the Mage who summons trembling. All the residents of the Bonnet estate were happy to see Faye. They asked their children to try to befriend the boy. Everyone was sure Faye Bonnet is capable of becoming an unparalleled medium. Faye Bonnet and his parents returned to the estate. They were greeted by the maids. Faye's parents went ahead and the maids bowed before them. They entered the living room and sat on the sofas. Mother Fairy stroked her son's head and told him that very soon he would turn 7 years old. Father Fairy was glad that his son would be 7 years old. Faye turned to his father and asked what would happen if everything went wrong and he was defeated. Faye's father clarified what he meant. All children, as soon as they turn 7, go to the church and sign a contract called the spirit contract. Whether a child can communicate with spirits is determined the same way as in the whole world. If a child fails to conclude a contract with a spirit, everyone will later look down on them and their career will immediately become hopeless. Therefore, 7 years is a special age that affects the whole life. Faye was very tense, he knew. He has no right to fail, otherwise he will suffer all his life. The next day, everyone gathered to celebrate Faye Bonnet's 7th birthday. Everyone was happy. Today was Faye's birthday. They couldn't wait for the moment he would sign the contract with the spirit. All the estate's residents were in anticipation. They guessed that something amazing would happen that very day. Everyone gathered near the church. The priest met the fairy and her family and asked them to enter the church with him. Faye and his family went inside. The boy froze, seeing a colossal amount of grains of light. The father stepped forward and explained that these were spirits. In a church full of magical power, the lowest spirits prefer to live. Spirits of the lowest, middle, and highest ranks prefer nature, not churches. The priest says that according to ancient traditions, the fairy must make a contract with the spirit. The priest asks the boy to hold his hand over the spirit. Then he orders the boy to show his magical power. Faye raised his hand and moved towards one of the spirits. Faye's parents could no longer wait for the contract with the spirit to be concluded. Faye took a deep breath, opened his eyes, and addressed the spirit with a request. He said he wanted to make a contract with the spirit to gain its power. Faye tells the spirit that she will repay the debt with her strength and return magical power to him. Faye also claims, if this contract is feasible, the spirit can take his magical power and enter it. Everyone watched as the boy was enveloped by magic. The magic began to spread throughout the entire church. Everyone was amazed by Faye's abilities. Mother Faye was just as delighted, and father at that moment smiled and thought that his son was very talented. He wanted Faye to show all his strength and abilities. Suddenly the spirit flew away from Faye. The boy froze and stared at it, not understanding. He could not comprehend why it happened. The priest approached the boy and said that he and this spirit were incompatible. He asked the boy to approach the other spirits and try to make a contract with one of them. The Fae approached the other spirits to make a contract, but he failed. They all simply flew up and scattered away. The observers turned to the boy and said the fight was much harder. They had already accepted that the boy was unable to make a contract with any of the spirits. At that moment, the entire Fae family looked at him gloomily. Faye sharply turned around and looked at his parents with horror. Brem also saw all this and had no idea why everyone decided that making a contract with a spirit would be so easy. Faye recalled all the words about his outstanding abilities that people around him once claimed. He remembered his father. He confidently said that his son would make a contract with a spirit. Faye's gaze sharply jerked to his brother. Brem lowered his head and glared angrily at Faye. Faye understood his fate entirely depends on the spiritual contract. The boy decided to unleash all his magical power. Everyone watched and felt the mighty magical aura. Faye stretched out his hand and tried again to make a deal with the other spirits, but they all immediately flew away from him. All the observers were amazed. The spirits simply took off and ran away from the Fae, and the boy's mouth dropped open in astonishment. When everyone left the church, a lot of conversations arose. People did not believe that Faye could not make a contract with the spirit. Everyone saw great potential in him. Faye turned around and looked at her parents. They were too gloomy. The boy turned away, lowered his head, and bowed. The rain started, and at that very moment Faye understood. It was all over because he failed to make a contract with the spirit. The whole family returned to the estate. Faye immediately settled in his room. He lay down on the bed and pulled his legs up to himself. Mama Fairy asked her husband what they would do. She was gnawed by the thought of how their son could do that to them. Father Faye understood it could not be left like that. They needed an heir who would make a contract with the spirit. At that time, Faye was standing by the door to the room and overheard the conversation of her parents. After that, she decided that she still needed to return to the room. When Faye was already sitting in his room, his brother came in and said that for the boy, this was the end. Faye just looked at him and said nothing. Bram was angered that Faye did not respond to him, but suddenly Bram heard someone calling his name. He smiled and rushed to the parents, waving his hand to his brother at the end. Faye lowered his head and became gloomy. He thought that from that day all the members of his family became completely different people. When Faye was walking down the street, he overheard a group of boys discussing what happened in the church. People simply could not believe that Faye failed to make a contract with the spirit. Faye approached the group of boys. They noticed that boy and suddenly fell silent. Faye smiled and asked if everything was all right. The boy darted into motion and began waving his hands, insisting that everything was fine. Faye did not listen to the boys until the very end and left. Everyone silently exchanged glances in complete stupor. Faye approached the tree, recalling the words of the boys he had recently met. Faye closed his eyes and began to use his magic. Suddenly he heard someone's admiring exclamations. Faye turned around and saw a boy sitting on a bench boasting about his spirit. Next to him stood a girl. She was glowing with joy because she had signed a contract with a spirit. Faye lowered his hands and frowned. Then he decided one must not fall into despair. He raised his head and firmly decided for himself he just needed to concentrate. Faye returned home. Just then the maid approached him and said that his father was calling. She added that his father was waiting for him in the study. The boy looked at the maid with surprise and said he was going to his father. Faye walked down the corridor and suddenly noticed something wrong. He rushed to the photos on the wall and saw all his images had been taken down. Some were even crossed out. Faye entered his father's office and stood right in front of his desk, behind which he was now sitting. Mother, brother, and sisters stood at a distance from the father. Faye looked at his father in horror, waiting for him to speak. The father turned to Faye and announced that from now on he no longer belonged to their family. The man orders Faye to immediately pack his things and leave the estate. Faye's eyes widened in shock. One of the sisters looked depressed. The older sister showed no emotion and Bram stood smiling. The mother looked at her son with disgust. Faye ran out into the street. He ran and shouted. The boy was so angry that he began to swear and curse everything around. Faye was the name given to all the words from his family, those who supported him when he believed he was a capable boy. The boy does not notice the branch, stumbles, and falls to the ground. He clenches his fists tightly in anger. Then the boy notices a ball on the ground. He remembers how his sisters gave him a glass ball for his birthday, exactly the one he wanted. Faye bursts into even louder sobs. He hoped that his father would stop him as soon as he ran out into the street, but nothing happened. Faye lay down on the ground and looked up at the sky. Suddenly, he felt a strong magical power. The boy got up and leaned on his hands. He noticed that people from the family had come for him. They approached the boy and apologized. They said that now they would take care of the boy once and for all, just as the master ordered. Faye looks at the boys in horror, and at that very moment they begin to use fireballs to attack the boy. Faye is not afraid of elemental fire magic. He rises completely from the ground, extends his hands forward, and activates mid-level water magic, the water wall spell. Water magic, the fairy extinguishes all the intruders' fireballs, but they shout that this is not the end yet, and activate wind magic, summoning a hurricane and mixing it with fire magic. Faye understands they are trying to create a fire tornado by combining mid-level fire magic and wind magic. One of the boys says that the boy is actually very scary. He notes this is already visible from the movements of his magical power. Faye looks angrily at his tormentors. Faye had known since childhood, ordinary magicians are much weaker than spiritual summoners. The boy thought about how in the kingdom of Armando the eldest son always became the heir. If everything really went as usual, he would become the new head of the family. Faye knew his father Alex's greatest fear was losing the title of Duke and no longer being in the top 5 most influential people. The boy's thoughts were interrupted by a fiery whirlwind funnel rushing straight at him. Faye understood with such a level of magic he would neither be able to repel the attack nor respond with a counterstrike. Faye falls to his feet and casts a spell, and then suddenly bursts from the spot and runs away. One of the boys exhales and says that Faye is very stubborn. The fire tornado was still trying to reach Faye, but the boy did not give up and kept running. Additional systemic magic that allowed the body to be enchanted was necessary in case magical powers were introduced into every cell of the body. It was used to enhance physical abilities. The fire tornado was still hiding Faye and he fell, starting to cough from the pain. Then he got up again and continued running. The boy rushed through the forest trying to escape from his tormentors. He was in unbearable pain, but he had to get out. He tried not to think, instead he focused. The boy suddenly felt a side effect of the magic. He lost sensitivity in his legs and began to fall forward. Faye fell to the ground and hit a tree, swearing as his vision began to darken. Faye lay on the ground, covered in blood, and was gripped by severe pain. His vision slowly darkened. He had no idea if this was really the end for him. He could not believe that everything would end in such a place, and just because of one defeat, Faye decided not to give up, not yielding to emotions. He sharply cut off the stream of thoughts and firmly decided his life would not end like this. Faye decided no matter what happens, he must escape. He has to take back his life. Faye remembered the boy's words about how his father ordered the body to be burned after the mission was completed. Faye decided the best option was to make a copy of himself. He was sure that this would definitely give him a chance to escape. The boys followed the boys. One of them asked where Faye was. The boy was hiding behind a tree. Faye looked at the boys and thought that there must be something he could do. Faye thought about what would happen if he applied volumetric magic and covered her with black. The boy used medium earth magic, the clay doll spell, as well as medium dark magic, after which he combined both. The boys saw the boy and approached him. They saw a body on the ground, but in reality it was a dark doll created by combining the highest level of darkness and earth magic. The boys decided that Faye had fainted. One of them asked if he had fallen because he was tired. In the end, the boys resorted to magic. They summoned a fire tornado and burned the doll. At that moment, Faye was sitting by the tree and pressing his palm to the wound. He was in unbearable pain. Suddenly, someone approached the boy and asked if he was okay. The boy's eyes widened sharply and he got up from the ground. The girl approached him and extended her hand. The boy looked at her tiredly and indifferently. The boy did not extend his hand. The girl pressed it to herself and said that something was definitely wrong with him. She added that his wounds looked very painful. The girl landed right in front of the boy and asked him to endure a little. She said she could heal him. After that, she began to hum a song. Faye looked at the girl in complete confusion. The girl got up from the ground and said that it was a joke so the boy wouldn't worry. The girl began to perform magic and this surprised Faye. She raised her hands and spoke the spell full recovery. Faye's whole body became normal again. He realized the girl had applied the highest level of water magic, the full healing spell. The wound on the boy's stomach completely healed. Then Faye raised his head and looked at the girl in amazement. She smiled and said that now everything would be fine with the boy. Faye knew healing magic is incredibly difficult to master. Complete healing is magic of the highest level. He was struck that the girl used it with such unusual ease. The girl says that the face should not be moved much. The wound has not yet fully healed. Faye thanks the stranger and the girl replies that it was not that difficult. She asks how the boy ended up in the forest with such terrible wounds. Faye immediately frowned. The girl looked at the boy with surprise. Faye wondered if he could so easily tell everything to a stranger. He remembered his whole family and the phrase they gave him. The girl looks at the boy with a smile and waits for his reaction. Faye is still tense. Suddenly, the girl begins to calm the boy. Faye raises his head and looking at the girl in surprise, asks what that means. The girl smiles and says that she lives alone in the forest. She convinces the boy whatever he tells her will remain only between them. She tries to make him understand that they are not enemies. Faye's eyes widened in surprise. He did not understand why this girl treated him so well. The girl approaches the boy, strokes his head, and says that there was a very frightened expression on his face. Faye looks at the girl puzzled. Then he asks if he really seems that scared to her. The girl sits next to Faye. The boy begins to tell how his birthday went. He finishes and says that his father kicked him out of the house because he did not make a contract with the spirit and then sent his men after him. The boy finishes the story and sums up, that's how it all happened. The girl says that it is no surprise because the bonnets always care only about their title and reputation. The girl falls silent. Faye turns and looks at her as if asking. Suddenly the girl brightens up and says that if the boy has nowhere to go, he can go with her. Faye asks where they are going. The girl smiles and says she always dreamed of having a son. She asks if this could be fate. The boy is silent for a while, then asks if he can allow himself to push the girl. The girl pats the boy on the back and says he doesn't need to be so modest. Faye says the girl hit him with her hand so noticeably. The girl smiles and replies they have an agreement. She says her name is Lana Dirk. The boy says his name, then adds the girl's surname and it becomes Faye Dirk. The girl is silent for a while and the boy tenses up, asking what happened. She replies that everything is fine and announces, from now on his name is Faye Dirk. The boy blushes, repeating his new surname again and again. The girl and the boy rise from the ground. Lana takes the boy's hand and leads him along. She says she likes his new surname. Lana happily welcomes the boy into her family. Faye asks the girl to take care of him. The girl asks if the boy can call her mother. Faye immediately agrees. 6 years later, Faye woke up in his bed and sharply sat up straight. He looked at his hands and realized he was sweating. Lana suddenly bursts into his room and greets Faye. The man looks at Lana in shock. The girl approaches the boy and asks if he wants to eat or take a shower. Faye then asks how the girl manages to appear so quickly just as he woke up. Lana says she simply cast a spell on his bed to let him know he woke up. Faye demands that she remove the spell. The girl notices that Faye is sweating heavily. She hugs herself and says they definitely need to take a shower together. And at that moment, the boy grabs a change of clothes and runs to the shower. The men lock themselves in the shower. Lana approaches the door and shouts fiercely that there is no need to lock it with magic. The man comes out of the shower, goes to the dining room and sits at the table. When Faye decides to start breakfast, he notices that Lana is offended with him. Faye noticed that the girl's cheeks puffed up like a hamster's. Because of this, Faye laughed and blushed. The girl became indignant and said that she was not a hamster. The table was full of delicious food. The boy took everything that caught his eye. Lana decided to start a conversation and asked Faye how he slept. Faye tells that he dreamed of the same day in the forest when he and Lana met. The girl is gloomier than he is. Lana leans over him and asks what Faye would do if she came across one of the bonnets. The boy turns away and remains silent. Then he looks at the girl again and says that he would do nothing. Lana asks why he would do nothing. He reminds him that he can use his magical powers. 5 years ago, Lana brought Faye to the tree where spirits were flying. The boy tried to make a contract with them, but he never succeeded. That day, Lana approached Faye and said that he had incredible abilities. She added that the fact he could not make a contract with a spirit seemed to her a silly joke. Then Lena and Faye hear strange sounds. They return to the tree and notice a huge number of spirits. The boy was able to summon such a mass of higher spirits. The girl was amazed. Lana's eyes widen with surprise as soon as she notices 5 more eccentric girls in the tree. She could not believe that 5 imperial beasts appeared right before them. She shifts her gaze from one girl to another and sees. One has red iced symbol of fire, another blue symbol of water, green symbol of wind, yellow symbol of thunder, brown symbol of earth. One of the girls says that she has not seen a powerful mage for many years. Everyone jumps and leaps from the tree, starting to walk in a circle around Faye. Lana watches everything happening, stunned. Lana recalled the story about how once 5 heroes drove demons out to the Dark Continent. Each of them had a contract with only one of the 5 imperial beasts. One of the girls reaches out her hand to Faye. At that moment he realizes, on his birthday the lower spirits fled because they were afraid of such immense magical power. All the spirits embraced Faye. Lana does not believe what is happening. She says that no one has ever been able to make a contract with all 5 imperial beasts at once. The guy interrupts her memories and says he is glad because that day he met Lana. Lana says that is very sweet. She turns away and says she wants to show the boy something. Faye tenses. The girl slips a brochure to the man. Faye carefully examines it and notices that it is a brochure about a spiritual school. The girl asks if Faye knows, at 13 years old everyone must take an entrance exam to the theological school. The girl notices that the boy is tense. He asks what it means. Lana tells him not to worry, he has successfully passed the document check. The girl says that Faye will have to take some kind of test. At that moment Faye thinks if he goes to school he might meet his sisters and brother there. Lana continues to tell and says that in the spiritual school there is a division into classes. She claims if that boy has contracts with higher spirits he can easily transfer to a class if he wants. Faye interrupts the girl and says it is better to be an ordinary mage. He realizes, if someone finds out he has a contract with imperial spirits there will be a scandal. Lana asks the boy if he knows the difference in social status between an ordinary mage and a spiritualist. Faye answers that he does not know. Lana says that the power of ordinary magic and the power of spiritual magic are significantly different. The girl notes that the difference in power between an ordinary magician and a spiritualist is colossal. She is convinced that this is exactly why the Bonnets tried to deal with that boy. Faye tenses. Lana continues and says that a mage can never defeat a spirit mage. She convinces the boy that everyone knows about this. Lana also says that in their time there is a noticeable age difference between people in different generations, which makes the status of a mage significantly lower than that of a spiritualist. Lana is going to tell Faye about the class system, first saying that first graders are divided into 5 classes from A to E, clarifying that among them from A to D are the spiritualist classes, recalling and saying that E is the mage class with 30 people, adding that the number of spiritualists in a class is unlimited, and repeating that there can only be 30 mages in a class. Faye says that then it turns out uneven. Lana continues and says that starting from the second Europa study, 1 more class S will be added. The guy asks which exactly this class is. Lana explains at the end of the first year there will be a test and only the top 20 candidates will be able to enter this class. Lana convinces the boy that everyone is trying to get into class S. Faye is surprised and asks why everyone wants to be in this class. Lana replies, students who finish this class will immediately be granted the corresponding status. She adds and says that ordinary mages can also get in, but there has never been such a case before. Lana finishes explaining the structure of the spiritual school, then Faye looks away and says she will study in class. The next day, Faye heads to the National School of Spiritual Magic in the Kingdom of Armando. Faye remembered, in every country there is one and only institution, the spiritual school. The boy approaches the gates and realizes he has come to the right place. The decision is one to go further to the main door. Faye found out that after the demons are destroyed, they might return someday, so the country is making every effort to train brilliant mages and clerics and strengthen its forces. After completing the training, many paths open up, to become a cleric of the royal palace or, for example, to join the army. Faye approached closer and began to look around. She saw an incredible number of teenagers. They were the ones about to enter the school. Faye went further and after a moment heard everyone start talking about someone's arrival. Faye turned around and saw his parents walking alongside the children. The boy spotted Bram and the sister. She's eyes widened in surprise. His family flashed past. They didn't even look. Faye couldn't believe they would meet so soon. Faye clenches his hands with all his might. He tried to convince himself that they thought he was dead. Faye then went further and began looking for Class E. She entered the classroom and everyone immediately stared at her, but after a moment each returned to their work. Faye looked at the board and noticed the teacher's message. All students must sit in their seats according to the names written on the desks. When Faye sits at the table, a blonde boy approaches him and says that he has very beautiful black eyes. Faye looks at the boy in complete confusion. The blonde asks him not to misunderstand him. He says he likes beautiful girls. He just wanted to get to know him. The blonde says his name is Gason Downer and asks to be called only by his first name. Faye continues to stare at him, obviously confused. Faye introduces himself and says that Jason can also call him by his name. The blonde begins to seem as if he remembers something. Faye freezes, tenses up. He says he has heard his name somewhere before, but then decides it was just his imagination. The boy blushes and asks if Faye has seen the student union president and his deputy. He says they are very handsome. The girl approaches them and says that it is very dangerous. She wonders why all the boys are the same. Jason asked the girl who she was and why she approached them. He was terribly angry because of her comment. The girl points to herself and says her name is Iris Miri. She was glad to meet you. She greets only Faye. Jason asks why the girl does not shake his hand. She throws sharp remarks at the boy. Faye asks both of them to stop. The girl also begins to recall that she has seen this boy somewhere before. Faye turns his head aside and says that they all just made it up. In childhood, Faye was often invited to receptions organized by the Bonnet family. It was there that Iris saw him. Suddenly, Faye heard a familiar voice. Bram and his friend entered Class E and began speaking about him contemptuously. Hyzen starts to get angry. He asks what all this means. One of the boys tries to stop Hyzen and says that Bram is from Class A, the best. Hyzen retorts, so what? Faye sits covering his mouth with his palm. He is terribly afraid. Suddenly, he hears himself greeting Hyzen and calling him to fight. Iris says even if they fight, Hyzen still has no chance of winning. Hyzen asks if she really thinks he will lose. Iris replies there is nothing to be ashamed of here. Then Iris turns around just as someone approaches her. Faye looks away and thinks that this is exactly what Lana was talking about. Bram looks confusedly at the students of Class E, and then his friends call him saying that their teacher has already arrived. Bram realizes that they all need to stay in place, so he leaves. Hyzen says that Bram is lucky he escaped death. Bram just smiles. 6 years ago, Faye's parents sat facing each other. The man turned to his wife. She asked what important conversation they were preparing. The man says he would like to talk about Faye. He assumes the woman herself understands that Faye cannot become a spiritist. The man reminds them that Faye is the eldest son of the Bonnet family, so he must become the next head of the family, and adds even more grimly, their son is an ordinary mage. The woman, embarrassed, says that someone else can be appointed head. She asks if this is not forbidden, and suggests Bram and Cecilia as heirs. The man asks how they will explain this to His Majesty and the other princes, including the family of the Duke, and he asks if they can say that their son is an ordinary mage. The woman asks what he intended to do in this case. He leans in and says it would be better if they had never existed. Bram was eavesdropping on this very moment and was glowing from what he heard, although he understood. His mother still doubts. Suddenly, a man approached Bram. The boy recognized Armand, the head of the Bonnet family, on the roadside. Armand served the Bon family as a butler, and to be honest, he was the second most influential right after the current head of the family. Armand believes that Bram already understands everything himself. He says that Mr. Alex and everyone else are worried about what to do with Faye. The man asked what Bram himself thinks about it. The boy raised his head and asked again. Armand asks what the boy would like to happen to Faye. Bram asks what the man means. The man smiles slyly, then asks if the boy wanted his brother to simply disappear. He asks if he can guess. At first, Bram laughs, then becomes serious and says that this is exactly the case. He wanted Faye to disappear from this world. Armand is satisfied with the boy's answer. He leans toward him and says what must be done to get rid of his brother. The man enters the parental room and says that His Majesty must be informed. Faye was attacked by a demon and she did not survive the attack. He says this is a very dangerous method. Parents turn around and see Armin with Brahm. They ask what happened. Armin says if the fairy was expelled but left alive, then one day the parents could be accused of lying to His Majesty. Alex agrees. Armin looks at the boy. Brahm is trembling with excitement. He understands that now he also needs to say something. Brahm says that the fairy must be gotten rid of once and for all. The parents look at their son in surprise. Armin turns to Alex and reminds him that he was the one who wanted to get rid of his son. He asks to leave this matter to him. He convinces the man, saying that the best people will do it. Alex tries to say something, but Brahm interrupts him and asks if Alex really understands everything. The man's face darkens. Brahm continues and says that those who do not sign a contract with the spirit will have no future. He asks if this is true. The man closes his eyes and after a few seconds turns back to Armin. He orders him to deal with the fairy. Armin looks at Brahm and smiles. Then the man shifts his gaze to Alex and says he understands him, promising that everything will be done. The man enters Class E and it turns out he is the homeroom teacher. He says his name is Aaron Gavel. He reminds them everyone in their class is a mage. He says that he himself is also an ordinary mage. Everyone looks at the teacher in confusion but still greets him. The man was about to say something important to his students. He says that the director's policy is not to distinguish between spirit mediums and mages. Next, he says that even some teachers not to mention students can be terrible to other students. He asks if his students understand this. The teacher says that every year after entrance exams, there will definitely be someone who will pick on them. He convinces his students that they do not need to respond in kind even in such cases. He says if the other side makes the first move, the school rules will be on their side. He asks his students to be patient in order to become stronger. The teacher raises his voice and says that they must become stronger. He asks them to look at their oppressors with pride. All the students agree with the teacher. At 7 years old, every child undergoes a ceremony to make a contract with a spirit, and the results of the second contract will determine their entire life. Faye recalled how at his ceremony all the spirits simply fled from him, dooming him to a terrible future. In the church, everyone was fervently discussing this moment. An unprecedented scandal erupted around the Bonnet family. Faye was unable to make a contract with a spirit. Alex sat opposite his wife. He could not believe that Faye would not be able to sign the contract. The woman decided that the boy was behaving disrespectfully towards his parents. The man says that magicians are significantly inferior to spiritualists. He insists, if the next head of the Bonnet family is an ordinary mage, then their family will no longer be among the 7 most influential. The man cursed. Faye recalled how strangers tried to kill him with a fire tornado. He also remembered meeting Lana. Faye realized if his family found out that he was alive, they would definitely come again to deal with him. The man knew no one must find out the truth, therefore he decided to be as quiet as possible. All the students gathered in a huge hall. The event host stood right in front of them. He greeted everyone and congratulated them on their admission to their school. Then the host announced that the director had something important to say. A girl came onto the stage. At that very moment, Iris was trying to wake Jisun, who was sleeping. The director greeted all the first-year students. She announced that her name was Jessica Friel. All the students thought that the child was the director, and they assumed that the girl was 8 years old. Most could not believe that the girl was the director. The director asked everyone to be quiet. She said that she was 21 years old, so all the students could breathe easy, and she convinced them that she did not have enough magical powers for Her Majesty to entrust her with this position. Many spectators were shocked that the girl was so young. No one could believe that she was much older than she looked. The director demonstrates his magic and says that he looks like that and there is nothing you can do about it. Disputes about the director's age continued. There were even those who spoke very negatively about the girl. The director stopped abruptly. She lowered her head while everyone else continued discussing her appearance and age. Another teacher tried to calm her down. The director used elementary wind magic, a spell, sound memory. With this spell, she encoded the air vibrations with the wind. This magic allows preserving the sound of speech. Those who possess it usually carry a hidden meaning. The director blushes and shouts that the students do not need to worry. At that moment, everyone falls silent. The director continues the speech and says, they came to the institution for magicians and spiritual seers to be able to protect themselves and their loved ones from demons. She asks all the students to get rid of their overconfidence and sharpen their power over the next 6 years. Aizen approaches Faye and says that he did not think the director would turn out to be some little girl. Faye replies, Aizen is exaggerating. Suddenly someone addresses Faye. The boy turns around and sees boys asking him to prepare for document verification and the entrance exam. Faye remembers how Lana convinced the guy that he did not need to worry because he passed the ID check, and then he remembers how his girlfriend said something about a test. Faye realizes that he needs to take the test, so he follows the boys who came for him. At that moment, his sister notices him. Faye rushed after the boys into the building. The one with glasses says that Faye must show the magic he haste one described in his admission documents. The second replies, "Yes, using intermediate magic of the 5 attributes and elemental magic of light and darkness, Faye will have to hit the target." Faye remembered that Lana wrote before intermediate magic. He understands. He could really use high magic right now, but a newcomer who entered the school and immediately had magic at a level not lower than high would only provoke too many rumors. Faye uses fire magic, a fire spear force. Then the boy activates the wind element, a wind spear force. Next, he applies the lightning element, a thunder spear force. Then he uses the earth element, a clay spear force, and the water element, a water spear force. Faye stretches out his hand forward and releases magical bolts directly at all the targets. The examiners look at the targets in shock. They find it hard to believe. They remembered that Faye had just entered. The man in glasses signs the papers and says he has no questions. He asks Faye to show him how to master basic light and dark magic. Faye demonstrates his abilities. The examiners smile and say the boy passes. Faye recalled, depending on the attribute, there are strengths and weaknesses, and they change with the power. The examiners were impressed that Faye could not form a spiritual contract. They decided it was something incredible. Faye rushed back after successfully passing the exam. He did not want to be found, so he hurried back. Suddenly, someone's hands reached out to Faye. The boy turned around and saw a girl who was addressing him. She asked if his name was really Faye. Faye immediately recognized his girlfriend, the very one he shielded from fiery bullets several years ago. The girl introduced herself and said that her name was Melia Fames. She asked if the boy remembered her. A man notices a bandage on the girl's arm. His mouth freezes in surprise. Then he overcomes his anxiety and asks if this is not their first meeting. Melia does not understand why the boy is acting so strangely. Faye glances at the girl for a moment, then says that his name is Faye Dirk. He adds that she can just call him by his first name. The girl asks what all this means. She addresses the boy. Could he really not be Faye Bonnet? Faye pretends to recall the eldest son of the Bonnet family. He says that he really had the same name. He asks if he died from a demon attack. Melia cries. She smiles, apologizes, and runs away. Faye returned back to the building. He lay on the bed and plunged into thoughts about those he met after passing the test. He realized that he could not tell the girl the truth. Then Faye remembers the director's words about how to protect himself and the people he loves. Memories flash in his mind about how he saved the girl from an attack by his brother and his friends. Faye returned and decided that he must not give in to emotions and act foolishly just because they are acquainted. He tells himself that a lot of time has passed since then. And it seems to him that Melia has become stronger to protect herself. The man again recalls the bandage on his own arm. He shifts on the bed and pretends that it just fell off somewhere. He convinces himself that no one bullied the girl. And he looks at his hand and remembers how Lana got injured several years ago. At that time, Faye was still a very small boy. He used the power of the 5 beasts and accidentally injured the girl. She fell to the ground and lay unconscious for some time. Then Faye was very scared and rushed to Lana. He decided that he would never use the power of the 5 beasts again. It was after this incident that Faye decided to live as an ordinary mage. Morning came. Faye grimaced with disgust as the sun's rays penetrated his room. He got out of bed, dressed, and then headed to the exit of the building. Before that, he tied up a joint photo there of him and Lana. Faye walked along the lively city street and saw a crowd of people. He continued on and thought that he could no longer rely on Lana. He wondered if he could find a part-time job. Faye entered the classroom and immediately sat at his desk. Iris followed and greeted the boy. The man turned to the girl and smiled. He greeted her too. Then he asked where Jisun was. The girl said she had no idea and called the man gorilla. Gai-san entered the classroom and glared fiercely at the girl. He asked what Iris had just said. They started arguing again. Gai-san looks at Gai-san and Iris and thinks they are behaving too aggressively. Melia enters the classroom. Faye immediately turns around and notices her. He greets the girl and she sharply begins to bow. Iris looks at the girl with misunderstanding. At this moment, Gai-san blushes and calls the girl sweetheart. He says that Iris has a lot to learn from this girl. Iris flares up with anger and asks what exactly this boy just said. The homeroom teacher says that their first lesson will be practical. He steps forward so that the students lined up in a row can see him. The homeroom teacher says that from now on he will teach them magical skills. The homeroom teacher says that first they must understand the basics of magic and learn to control it. Hyzen looks at his homeroom teacher when he talks about magic control and he feels disappointed. The boy understands this is his weak spot. Iris leans closer and asks if he has any strong points. Someone in the line says that they do not want to do basic magic. He wants to do flashy, showy magic. They knew just practicing is too mundane. He did not think there would be many people who would really like it. The homeroom teacher demands that all students calm down. He says that all students only think about how to raise their magic rank and asks if he is really right. The homeroom teacher raises his index finger and explains that magic becomes stronger as you rise in rank. He convinces them that this is both right and wrong. The homeroom teacher adds that magical power is proportional to rank, but if it is not developed, students can be defeated even by magic of a lower rank. The man assures that if they train hard and gain impressive magical power, they can even obtain spirit magic. The class teacher explains, if students use too much magical power, it will simply run out and this will cause anemia and lack of oxygen. Hyzen raises his hand and calls upon his magical powers. Iris looks at the boy and says that it is a disgrace. Elia also tried to summon magical power but realized it is very difficult. The class teacher raises his hand and asks the students to make the color of their magical power as close to white as possible. The man says, the higher the magical power, the whiter it is, and adds that it works the other way around too. The lower the power, the darker it is. Iris looked at Jason and said that his magical power is completely black. Gaizan frowns and curses. He liked the black color of magical power. The class teacher turns his head to the side and notices Fairy his magic was white. The man was impressed Faye had pure and powerful magical power. He did not understand how the boy could have that, and moreover, he was only a freshman, and everyone, along with the teacher, was impressed by Faye's abilities. Faye nervously tenses up when he realizes that he has attracted attention. Melia looks at the boy with anxiety. Jason hugs Faye from behind and says that he is a very strong mage. Faye asks what this boy is doing. All the students immediately ran up to Faye and began asking how he managed to develop such incredible magical power. They asked the boy to teach them this. Faye was confused. Faye puts his hands forward and says that he is not doing anything special. The students do not understand what this boy is talking about. Faye says that after the failure to make a contract with the spirit, he went crazy, so he trained every day to break through. The class teacher asks if the students understand what they need to do. He reminds them again they must make every effort. Melia could not believe that it was not Faye standing before her, the very one who once saved her from his brother and his friends. All the students returned back to the classroom. Gason said goodbye to Faye. The boy also said goodbye to him and said they had a great time. Melia was walking down the school corridor when some boys appeared behind her. They were looking for a girl. One of them asked if this was the one. Melia sharply turned around and looked at them with anxiety. Faye went outside. Suddenly he heard a girl's voice breaking the silence with a scream and asking him to stop. Faye recognized Melia's voice. He went around the corner from where the screams came. There he saw Melia sitting on the ground and sobbing, and next to her the boy saw Bram. Faye heard the voices of other students nearby. They wanted to help the girl but did not want to get involved with Bonnet. They understood, if they intervened, it would affect their lives. Bram approaches the girl and grabs her by the hair. He asks what is wrong with her. He says that if she does not resist, something terrible will happen. The girl, sobbing, replies that she is in pain. She will beg this boy to let her go. Bram smiles and says that once his brother tormented him at moments like these, he is overcome with nostalgia. The boys standing behind Bram mocked Faye, who was trying to fight back those who were bothering her. They recalled, Faye could not even make a contract with a spirit. Melia looks away and says that Faye is not a loser. Bram sharply grabs her by the hair and demands that she be silent. Faye looks at the girl with anxiety. Faye cursed. He did not know what to do in this situation. He wanted someone to come and help the girl, but no one dared to go against Bonnet. Faye decided that he would not wait for help and would go alone, but then hesitated. Again, one should know who he really was. Faye clenched his hand into a fist. Memories of his birthday, how his family had kicked him out of the house, and how he had fled from the fiery tornado flooded back into his mind. Then the boy remembered how he helped Melia. He thinks about the girl and recalls the director's words that he is learning magic to protect himself and his loved ones. Melia sat on the ground trembling, hugging herself with her arms. At that moment, Bram raised his hand and declared that he would throw one fireball at her after that she would no longer be able to hide anything. Bram's friends supported him. Bram points his hand at the girl and says that if she does not like it, she can try to fend off the attack. Melia closes her eyes and waits for the boy to attack, but suddenly, Faye appears right in front of her and asks Bram if he is crossing the line. Bram recoils in fear. He says that Faye has neither grown nor changed at all. Melia rises from the ground and looks at the boy who came to save her, tears in his eyes. Faye turns to the girl and apologizes. He says that now everything will be fine, Melia. She cried with happiness and realized she was not mistaken. This was the very same Faye who once saved her. Bram angrily asks who Faye is. He clarifies, does the guy really think he can just walk away after standing in his way? Faye asks if Bram really does not recognize him. He smiles and says that after all, 6 years have passed. Bram looks closely at the boy and then his eyes suddenly widen, begins to remember his older brother. He could not believe that he was still alive. Faye begins to squeeze magic in his fist. He says that Bram still enjoys torturing the weak. He says he is ashamed because they were once relatives. Faye turns to the girl and utters a spell. Complete healing covers her. Melia sees all wounds begin to heal instantly. Observers of this conflict wondered if the boy really used the spell Complete Healing. Everyone saw that Faye was a freshman, but he already knew how to use such complex spells. Bram was both irritated and impressed. He could not believe that the boy was capable of using the highest level of water magic, the spell of Complete Healing. Melia turns to Faye and thanks him for saving her. The boy is embarrassed. The girl's clothes were terribly torn. He apologizes and offers her his jacket so she can cover herself. Bram looked at his brother. Shock was frozen on his face. He turned to his brother and tried to explain that Faye was burned. The boy decided that it was complete nonsense. He remembers his father's people completed the task. He's sure that his brother could not have survived. Faye silently looks at his brother. Melia asks what all this means. She says she heard that Faye was defeated in a fight with a demon. Bram's eyes widen sharply. He realizes he said too much. All observers began to wonder what was happening. From the crowd of observers, a girl stepped forward. She addressed Faye. Faye looks at Bram and says he understands everything. He claims his brother was involved in everything because he knows the details. Faye says the information is correct. He tells how they dealt with him 6 years ago, adding that his body was burned. Bram pretends not to understand what his brother is talking about. Melia tries to say something, but Faye continues. The one who was really burned is the highest level of magic he created, Dark Doll. Bram shouts that all this is nonsense. He says that Faye could not have used this level 6 years ago. Faye says that whether the boy believes or not is his choice, but emphasizes, right now his living brother stands directly in front of Bram. Behind him, Bram heard other students excitedly talking about how Faye can use high-level synthesis magic. They got goosebumps from it. Bram cursed. Bram wondered what kind of atmosphere had formed around. He did not like that everyone suddenly spoke only about Faye. He remembered, in their family it had always been like that. Bram got angry because Faye received the most attention and all the parental warmth. That's why Bram dreamed that Faye would disappear. Bram turns to Faye and asks why he constantly saves Melia. He clarifies whether the boy is afraid of what will happen to him when the parents find out he is alive, and he says, it is a shame to leave such a gap unanswered. Faye gets angry because Bram speaks about the girl contemptuously. Bram says if Faye does not want him to also pull it out, then he should leave the girl and get lost. Faye refuses. Faye turns to Brahma and says that he continues to raise his self-esteem by mocking those who are weaker. Bram began to get angry because of Faye's words. He says that it is not like that at all, and asks if Faye knows that he belongs to the weak category. Bram begins to use magic. Faye looks at his brother with surprise. Both boys throw fire spears at each other. All the other students were impressed by the clash of magic between the two brothers. Bram is angry. Faye always received love that was nowhere near comparable to what he got, and every time made a knowing face as if it should be that way. He swears. Bram asks if Faye really thinks that the power he received is ordinary magic. The younger sister looks at Bram and cannot believe that he is about to use one of his most powerful spells. Bram touches his face with his hand and says that Faye really defeated him in everything except for the one power he has. Bram called upon a noble spirit. He asked it to show great power, feeding on his magical energy. Faye knew lower-ranked spirits are often shapeshifters. They are obedient, easy to control, but hard to tame, he remembered. If the spirit breaks free from control, its power is inferior to human power. Bram summoned a lower-ranked spirit to incarnate in the flame of the wolf. Bram smiled wildly and asked what Faye would do. He mocked this boy for resorting to intermediate magic, then said, "Let Faye sit down if he is afraid." Faye notices that his brother treats even spirits as objects. At that moment, Bram says he will now show who is truly stronger. He casts the fire needle spell. Faye raises his hands and utters a spell. A wall of water rises up, deflecting the fiery needles. Bram shouted that his brother is foolish. He was convinced intermediate magic could never defeat a lower spirit. One of Bram's friends says that using spirit magic in a crowded place is very dangerous, and asks, does he really want to drag others into his quarrel with Faye? Bram shouts that he doesn't care. He says he won't think about other students because they are weak. Faye thinks that Bram is already tired. He says the boy hasn't even reached intermediate spirit magic, and asks if Bram has already reached the limit of his magical powers. Bram asks what limit. He raises his hand, focuses magical power, and demands that Faye not look at him as weak. Faye is the first to open his eyes in surprise, then begins to shrink back. Bram looks at that boy and decides that he has already given up. Bram holds a bow in his hand. He laughs and is about to release a fiery arrow at that boy. Faye stares into Bram's eyes. He raises his hand and begins to release magic. The boy lifts water from the ground. Everyone around is stunned by the boy's abilities. Faye took water and decided to use it as a net. He directed the water net at Bram. He was looking at his brother with a tense expression on his face. The water net stretched straight towards Bram. In a few seconds, it reached the target and began pushing it forward. On the way, there were already students covering themselves with their hands, afraid that the water net would catch them too, but Faye skillfully controlled it so that it bypassed every student on its path. The water net pushed Bram and he crashed into the trunk of a tree. Faye stood and looked at his brother. Everyone was looking at the boys, speechless, stunned. Everyone around was impressed how Faye so carefully and precisely controlled the water net and it hit only the target. Most people froze in shock looking at Faye because they thought he had incredible control over his magical power, especially at such a young age. Even more shocking was that Faye was alive. Everyone thought the eldest son of the Bonnet family had died. Bram gets up and looks at his brother with anger. He thinks about attacking that bastard again. Bram noticed that his lower spirit was not moving. He looked at the spirit in shock and did not understand why it was not attacking Faye. Faye says that this is magic he created and only he can control it. He used unsystematic magic elemental control. Faye says this magic can even stop spirits for some time. Bram shouts that such magic is impossible to create. Faye says that such magic simply has limits. Faye says that he can use this magic precisely because he could not make a contract with a spirit. He says it is a long explanation. Bram asks what his brother means by that. Faye waves his hand, releasing his magical powers, and asks, what should he do best? Bram rises from the ground and asks what Faye is going to do. He says he is a Bonnet, so Faye cannot harm him. Faye replies that he is tired of hearing about the Bonnet family. Faye uses magic to create a stone ball and throws it directly at her brother. Bram screams and falls to the ground. Faye looks at Bram, hoping that he learned a lesson after their fight. Do not disgrace the weak. Bram crawled to his brother and demanded that he stop. Just then, an enormous stone ball fell on him. The boy lost consciousness. Faye's younger sister approaches him and apologizes. Faye sharply turns around and recognizes Alice's sister. He says he is no longer her older brother. The girl still tries to add something, but the boy has already left. Faye turned to the building and went into the shower. Under the pressure of the water, he stood and thought about how exhausted he was after the whole day. Faye came out of the bathroom and went to sleep. He thought about his sister and Melia. He grabbed a pillow and buried his face in it. The boy closes his eyes and decides that he needs to get something to eat because he was starving, but then he thinks he wants to sleep even more and postpones the snack. While the boy was sleeping, he heard a creak and some sound behind the door and then voices. Faye opened his eyes. The boy looked at the clock and realized it was still night. He was troubled by the thought of who could have come to him so late. Faye guessed it was bandits from the Bonnet family. The boy approaches the door and carefully opens it. A glance enters before him is Melia. The girl blushes and apologizes for coming to him so suddenly. Melia tightens the straps of her bag and asks if she can stay with this boy for the night. Faye looks at the girl in surprise. He asks what happened. The girl replies that it is hard for her to stay in the manor for long. Faye asks if she is talking about Bonnet House. Melia replies that it is exactly about it. Melia lived in Bonnet Mansion because her famous family was a branch of the Bonnet family. Faye asks what happened. Girl begins to tell what happened to Bram. A few hours before that, the girl jumped out of the crowd and asked what had happened. She ran to her sister Alice and asked her to explain. Alice looked at her sister Cecilia and said that the brothers had quarreled. The girl asked again which brothers Alice was talking about. Then she turned her gaze aside and saw Bram, who was outraged. She became scared. Her brother's face was swollen. She asked what had happened. The boy replied that nothing had happened. On the way home, Cecilia kept questioning her brother about what had happened. She tried to stop him and find out everything, but her brother asked to be left alone. Then the girl noticed Melia and turned to her. She asked what had happened. The girl tried to say something, but Bram ordered her to be silent. Cecilia was very angry at her brother. She approached the girl and placed her hand on her shoulder to calm her down. She asked the girl to tell her everything. Melia answered very uncertainly and quietly that Faye had indeed been alive all this time. Cecilia's parents Bram and Alice enter the room. Her father asks if Faye is really alive. Her mother is shocked and also wonders if it's true. Melia confirms this information once again. That evening, everyone in the Bonnet mansion was divided into two camps. Some rejoiced at the news that their brother had survived, while others, on the contrary, were extremely angry. Bram says that Faye suddenly cast a spell. As soon as he noticed it, he immediately covered Elisash fainted. Melia tries to say that Bram is lying, but he interrupts her and declares it happened exactly like that. He says that if he had not covered the girl, she could have been hurt. Father says there is nothing strange about Faye being angry. Mother says that Bram is a good boy. Bram smiles and asks how he could have acted otherwise. Eliz looks at her brother with disappointment and says that this is not true at all. Father says that Alice should be proud of such a reliable older brother. The girl tries to explain that it was not like that at all. Melia returns to Alex and tries to tell him the truth. The man is silent for a while, then turns his head and asks what the truth really is. Melia could not answer, she just burst into tears and decided that the best way out was to leave the estate. The girl says that is exactly why she came to the boy. She apologizes. Faye says there is nothing wrong with that. Asks how the girl found out where he lives. Melia says that it was Cecilia herself who helped her figure everything out. Faye recalls his sister was the president of the student council. He asks what Bram is doing now. Melia answers when she left, he was resting in his room. Melia wants to say something else but cannot. Faye notices this and asks what happened. Melia kneels and bows to this boy. Faye blushes and asks the girl to stand up. Melia asks to be forgiven for not being able to tell Alex how everything really happened. She was ready for punishment. Faye refuses to punish the girl. He asks why the girl is behaving so strangely. The fairy approaches the girl and says that he does not intend to approach her for anything. He convinces her that she has done nothing wrong. The girl tries to say something else, but the boy interrupts her and says that outsiders should not interfere so deeply. The boy is about to speak again, and Melia listens to him attentively. The man understood that Alex would never side with the one who knows the truth. He assured, on the contrary, they will definitely try to get rid of him very soon. Melia is scared and blushes. The man approaches her and asks if the girl is okay. She apologizes, her face smiles. Faye asked the girl if she wanted some buns. He said he was a bit hungry himself. Melia agreed. The girl took a shower and then went to sleep. She saw Faye and thanked him for letting her use the shower. Faye points to the place where she will sleep and says that the girl will sleep on his bed. The girl says that it is wrong because she has already caused Faye so many problems and troubles. Faye replies that he was always taught girls should not sleep on the floor. Melia asks if then they can sleep together. From the tension, Faye starts sweating even more as soon as he hears the girl suggest sleeping together. Melia blushes and says that everything is fine. Faye does not understand what is happening and why the girl is reacting that way. Faye says that it is a bit strange. The girl assures him everything is okay. She adds that she trusts him. Faye is confused by the girl's last phrase. He thinks it means only one thing: the girl simply does not see him as a man. Melia says if Faye sleeps on the floor, then she will also sleep on the floor. Faye replies, in that case all this is pointless. The man decides that they will sleep in the same bed like in childhood, like old friends. He thinks about it exactly like that. The girl looked at him and asked what he decided. Faye and Melia eventually ended up in bed together. The man was quite embarrassed. He thought about how he was used to falling asleep like that. He remembered that Lana sometimes also slept in the same bed with him. Faye turned around and looked at the girl. She seemed very cute to him. He smiled. Morning came. Sun rays broke into the room and the boy closed his eyes. Then he turned his head and saw that Melia was looking at him with a smile, greeting him good morning. The man suddenly got out of bed and went to prepare breakfast. He asked if the girl would also have breakfast. And Faye went outside. They saw the consequences of the fight between the boy and Bram's brother, a hole in the asphalt and a broken tree. Faye shuddered from the consequences. Melia laughed and said that nothing could be done about it anymore. Faye wondered what he would do if the teacher saw something like that and started scolding him. He thought it would be wonderful if everything could be resolved with magic. Faye and Melia enter the lesson. They look around, no one is in the classroom. Faye thinks they came early. Melia approaches the boy and calls him. She hands him a book about the practical application and effective use of low-level magic. The boy blushes and rejoices. Melia remembers how Faye gave her this book. At that time, she could only use low-level magic, so the boy gave her this book. Faye looks at the girl and smiles. He says that she held the book all this time. He assumes that the girl read it very often because it is cracked. The girl smiles in response and says she kept it because it was a gift from Faye. Faye asks the girl if she wants to practice magic together, like before. The girl claps her hands and says she really wants to resume their training again. Melia blushed with happiness. She was glad that she and Faye were spending time together again. The boy notices that the girl blushed, so he asks what happened. The girl does not have time to answer. Iris enters the classroom. Iris greets Faye and wishes him a good morning. She turns to the girl and asks how long they have been talking so nicely with Faye. She is curious when they managed to become such close friends. Melia does not have time to answer. Heising approaches Faye, puts his hand on her shoulder and says he heard everything. Faye asks what exactly he heard. Heising replies that he knows what happened the day before. Heising steps away from the boy and marvels at how he defeated the senior Bon. He is bursting with admiration. He says the whole school is already talking about it. At that moment, Faye shudders and thinks he has gone too far. Suddenly, Faye notices Jisun does not know who this man really is. Jisun catches his strange look and asks why he is looking at him like that. At this stage, Faye was surprised why he did not remember that he was Burnett. Other students entered the classroom. They were chatting about how Faye was incredible during the battle with his brother yesterday. Faye shyly thanked everyone for the compliments. Fate exhaled with relief. It turns out no one knew anything about his true identity. Jason hits the boy in the shoulder and asks what happened. He says he usually doesn't behave like that. Faye replies he just got lost in thought. Class teacher enters the classroom. He happily greets Faye. He says that this boy is a star. All the students began asking the teacher what had happened to him. The man was glad that the mage had defeated the seer. This had happened for the first time in history. He asked if it was a miracle. His dream had finally come true. Faye tensed. He was not an ordinary mage, so he did not share the man's joy. Faye thought that the homeroom teacher would be disappointed in him if he found out that he actually had a contract with the Imperial Spirits. The homeroom teacher noticed the boy's confused face and asked what had happened. Faye replied that everything was fine. He assured the teacher that he was just thinking about how he would be scolded, and that made him feel better. Suddenly, the class teacher remembered that the boy was called to the director. The director demanded that the boy appear in the office immediately. The boy suspected they would not let him go so easily. Faye, lowering his head, went to the director's office. He was again overcome with anxiety. He assumed they would demand that he reimburse the money for the repair. He thought about how to tell Lana about it later. Faye approaches the right door and freezes. He hesitates for a long time, then finally decides to knock. As soon as he touches it, a voice immediately sounds from behind the door, asking him to come in. The director sat at the table in the very center of the room and waited for Faye to enter. She looked up and asked if the boy's name was really Faye. The director introduced herself, stating her name and surname Jessica Friel. At that very moment, the boy confirmed that his name was Faye. The director asks if the boy knows why she invited him to the office. Faye assumes the reason is the fight between him and Bram that happened the day before. She says she wanted to talk about it. The woman asks the boy if he knows that their fight left a huge hole in the school's foundation. The boy says he knows and asks if he should pay for the repairs. The director says that compensation is not needed. She insists there is something else besides this. The woman insists that during the conflict, the students who were present the day before heard the boy mention many times that he is Faye Bonnet. She wants to hear from the boy what that means. Faye France notices this and asks what happened. The man replies that he is the former eldest son of the Bonnet family. The woman closes her eyes and says she understands. She asks if it is true that the boy was kicked out of the family and that the bandits went after him to cover all the tracks. Faye says that is exactly what happened. Faye asks if it was really that woman who made sure no one said a word about it. The director says that she herself stopped any discussions on this topic. She did not want to cause unnecessary confusion. It is more convenient for adults that way. Faye looks at the woman in surprise, notices his gaze and asks what happened. The woman blushes, then frowns. Faye thinks she looks like a hurt child, so he blushes too. The director says she will report the quarrel between Bram and Faye to the king, but even despite what happened a day ago, she does not think there will be any punishment. The director says that the Bonnet family are well-known people considered the highest authority in the country. She claims it is assumed to be much wiser to deal with financial matters than to punish in vain and wait for betrayal. Faye agrees with the woman's words, then she adds, on the other hand, inaction also leads to loss of authority. She thinks it will all end with the confiscation of land. Faye says that all this is already enough. He does not deny that a day ago he himself fell for the provocation and that he himself ignited an even bigger conflict. The woman replies, "Fall of the Bonnets is only a matter of time as they scare their citizens." Faye says he thinks so too. Then the woman orders the boy to forget everything she said a few seconds ago. Faye asks if that is all the headmaster wanted. The woman replies that there is one more thing they need to discuss. The boy asks what exactly. Jessica talks about controlling the elements. Faye looks at the woman in surprise. She says that this spell temporarily completely subjugates spirits and blocks their movements. She heard that only Faye is capable of controlling such magic, and asks what the principle is. Faye says she cannot answer. Jessica asks why. She clarifies, would it harm anyone if they found out about this magic? The man looks away and cannot answer, his jaw clenched from tension. Jessica asks why he cannot speak. Faye understood even if he explained the principle of how magic works, no one would still be able to use it. He remembered that this magic had certain conditions, but if he spoke of them, he could be suspected of involvement with the 5 imperial beasts. He could not allow that. The director says that she understands everything. She says, the fact that an ordinary mage defeated the spiritist can change a lot in the minds of other students. She dreamed about this, so she thanks this boy. Faye says he does not deserve gratitude. He claims that he defeated Brahma only on a whim. The woman looks at the boy in shock. Faye asks what happened. She says everything is fine. The woman thought that at such a young age Faye behaved too maturely. She could not imagine what the boy had to deal with, and she wondered what was going on in his head. The fairy comes out and says she will leave. Suddenly he notices a bookcase and books about appearance. The man did not understand why the woman needed such books, as he considered her quite attractive. The woman did not understand anything. Faye turned back to the lesson to where the dance class teacher was dancing by the board, and all the students were looking at him with complete confusion. Jason tells Faye that he has been gone for a long time. He asks what he was talking about with the director. Faye replies that he will tell everyone in the cafeteria. After school, Faye went into the cafeteria. As soon as he took a tray and headed to the table, Melia stopped him and said that he forgot his fork. The boy thanked the girl. Iris looked cautiously at the boy and the girl. When everyone sat down at the table, Iris asked why Melia addresses Faye as an older person. Faye replies to the girl and says that it is an old story. He agrees that the girl is right. After that, he turns to Melia and says that everything has changed so she can address him as an equal. Melia does not understand what the boy is talking about. Faye continues and says that it is very strange to treat a classmate as older than oneself. He advises the girl to remove all formality and polite ceremonies. Melia is confused. The girl lowers her head and blushes, imagining how she will communicate with Faye as if he were an ordinary classmate. Iris smiles slyly and watches the girl. Suddenly, someone's hands rest on Faye's shoulder. He turns sharply and sees his sister Cecilia. The girl introduces herself. She says her name and her status. She says that she wants to talk to him and asks if the boy can come to the student council office. Faye asks what if he does not want to enter the student council office. Cecilia asks the boy to enter the office again. The boy finally agrees and follows his sister to the student council office. He has no idea what to expect from her. Faye's older sister approaches him and introduces herself. She says her name is Faye's older sister and that she is the vice president of the student council. The girl asks the boy if he can come to her office. The boy was sitting in the student council office. He was very tense. Faye wanted to finish this quickly, so he asked why Cecilia invited him to the office. At that moment, the girl was pouring tea. Cecilia said that the president asked her to call him at this office. The girl says that the director will tell her all the details himself. Cecilia claims the director is supposed to come soon. The girl puts a tray with cups on the table. Faye takes one and looks intently at the girl. Then the boy looks away and tries the tea. He asks why the girl looked at him like that. Cecilia also looked worried. She asked if this boy would answer one of her questions. Faye puts her glass on the table and asks if this question is from the deputy head of the student council. The girl looks at the boy in surprise. Then she blushes and asks, what if this question is from the perspective of Cecilia Bon? Faye is silent for a moment, folds his arms, and says he has no desire to answer the girl's questions. Faye explains, he came to her only because the vice president summoned him. He assures the girl that there is no hidden subtext in this. Cecilia lowers her head and crumples the fabric of her skirt. She says that then she will ask as vice president. Faye looks away and thinks about the girl who abuses power. Cecilia asks why the boy went to the seminary. She is tormented by the thought, did he do it to meet Cecilia, Alice, and Bram? Faye looks back at the girl and asks why the boy wants to meet with them. Cecilia clarifies if he came to take revenge on them. Faye says he has no intention to take revenge. He insists, only one friend advised him to leave. And Faye also states that for him the Benettis are now just another noble family. The girl understands everything in her own way and asks if this means that Faye has forgiven their family. Faye looks at the girl and freezes in shock. He barely smiles and wonders if she got something mixed up. He cannot comprehend that the girl could have thought such a thing at all. Faye clenches his fist and, staring ominously at Cecilia, asks if she seriously thinks he can forgive their entire family. Cecilia looks at this boy with horror in her eyes. Faye says that he does not care about his old family, so he will not take revenge on them. This is a sufficient reason. He no longer wants to have anything to do with them. Faye says that his parents only felt that when the boy became stronger. He was very happy, so he tried even harder. That is why the boy did not notice that they loved not him but the strength he had. It was a good lesson for Faye because he understood. People are ugly, especially those who try hardest to look cute. Now he is sure, to protect himself there is no choice but to sacrifice himself even if it is family. That is exactly what Bone taught him. He is grateful to them for this lesson. Cecilia gets up and asks how Faye can talk like that about their family. Faye replies that the girl is exactly the same. He notes she, without first apologizing, asked if he could forgive them. Cecilia looks at her brother in shock. Faye says he met a person who proved to him that not all people are the same. He says he met someone kinder than his family. Cecilia lowers her gaze and blushes. The girl enters the office, rubs the back of her head, and apologizes for being late. Faye turns around and looks at her while Cecilia lowers her gaze. The girl seems to ask why the atmosphere in the room is so gloomy. She asks if Cecilia wants to return to the lesson. Faye is silent, and Cecilia thanks the girl and returns to the lesson. The girl says that she and Faye have not seen each other for a long time. She introduces herself as Leela Mort and asks if her boyfriend remembers her. Faye recalls the Merritt family, like the Bonnet family, was among the 7 wealthiest families of Armando. They were among the most influential and affluent people. About 10 years ago, Duke Merritt was promoted to Marquis. After that, their family became one of the most influential in the kingdom. Faye says she remembers the girl. He asks why she wanted to meet him. The girl replies there are 2 reasons why she called him. First reason is the girl wanted Faye to meet Cecilia. The man gets angry. Then Leela says the second reason is she needed him. Faye asks what all this means. Leela thinks that this man is not thinking about that. She raises her hand, points at the boy, and says she wants to invite him to the student council. Faye immediately refuses. The girl asks why the boy refuses. She reminds him that he defeated the elder Bonnet Brum, who showed great promise. She is certain this boy is the hope of all mages. Faye is embarrassed and looks away. He tries to say something, but the girl objects, not at all. Faye says that during their quarrel Bram simply was not up to the mark. He convinces the girl that Bram is too immature, that's why he was so easy to defeat. Leela says she knows everything. She winks at the boy and says he can join the student council a little later. Faye asks what that means. The girl says that the guy is right. If a freshman suddenly joins the student council, the senior students will not like it at all. That is why they decided to create a student organization. Faye asks what it all means. She says she has never heard anything like it. Leela says that this morning she received the director's approval. Faye asks how she managed to get it so quickly. Faye asks what exactly their organization is for. The girl corrects him. They do it for a specific target group. Leela says after a year of experience, Faye will be able to officially join the student body next year. Faye boldly retorts, I can't wait, then continues, the school lasts 6 years. He asks what will change if he joins the student body next year. Leela says that Cecilia became vice president already in the 3rd year. She notices that the boy is not listening to her and asks if he is really not interested. Faye is silent for a while. Leela says that if Faye joins the student council, then maybe the status of mages at school will rise a bit. Faye's eyes widen sharply in surprise. Faye continues and says that maybe his classmate Melia Famus will be less subjected to mockery. Leela understands. Faye wants to express his inner protest. Faye understands. As soon as he joins the student council, he will definitely get closer to the Bonnettes, starting with Cecilia. Faye refuses. Leela frowns and says that this guy is very stubborn. She thinks he has a lot of flaws. Leela looks at the boy and then sighs. Faye notices this and says that he has a reason to refuse. He no longer wants to be connected with the Bonnette family. Faye looks away and says that joining the student organization, no matter how much he wants to, will not allow him to shield himself from the Hatters. Faye says that the girl wanted to meet him. He asks why. She says that because of this he got into trouble, he tried to avoid it, and he is very angry about it. Leela sharply looked at the boy, stunned. She asked if he was also talking to Cecilia. Faye turned away and asked what the difference was. He places the cup on the tray among the dishes. At that moment, Lilia says that she still needs Faye. Leela says if the boy joins the student council, she will bring 2 more mages into the organization whom the boy will choose. Faye asks what the point is. Leela says that the maximum number of participants in the organization is 6 people. So if there are 3 mages including Faye, then there will be 3 spiritists. Therefore, their influence in the student council will be equal. Faye thinks and asks if he can ask the girl a question. Layla listens to him attentively. Faye asks if it is true that the strongest students were gathered in the student council. He says that taking so many mages will not be so easy. Layla says that everything will be fine. She will insist that those 3 seats be given to the mages. Faye asks if he can choose someone. Layla replies that he will be able to choose those who have high abilities for the position. Faye asks if it is true that not everyone can join the student council. Layla says that will be decided next year. The boy closes his eyes and thinks. Then his eyes suddenly widen because he sees Layla folding her hands and asking him to join the student council. Faye finally agrees. The girl screams with delight. She says that then the boy will have to bring 2 more tomorrow after school. Faye sharply asks why he only has 1 day. Layla says they have no time. Faye agrees and says that it is time for him to go. Layla stops the boy right at the door. She puts her hand on his shoulder. The boy turns around and meets the girl's gaze. Layla asks her to listen and orders Faye to talk to Cecilia. Faye looks at the girl in surprise, then asks why she is so boldly interfering in their personal life. Faye left. He needed to meet friends at a certain place. When the boy arrived where he needed to, Melia called him. She immediately smiled and said that they had been waiting for him all this time. The boy approached the table and heard Jisun grumbling. Apparently, they already have a test on unsystematic body enchantment with magic planned for next week. Iris said that is exactly why they need to develop a strategy. Faye approaches the table and immediately notices a pile of delicious food. He blushes and wonders. Friends have already managed to place an order. Melia laughs at Faye because he again could not resist sweets. Yuri and Gayson froze in surprise. They could not even imagine that Faye liked sweets. They watched as the boy enjoyed the sweet dishes. Iris and Gayson laughed. At that time, Cecilia returns home. Bram approaches and asks what happened. Cecilia says she wants Alice and Bram to join the student organization under the student council. Alice asks why. Cecilia says that after a year of working in this organization, they will be able to win a place in the student council. She claims she cannot say this for sure, but they will definitely have certain privileges. Bram thinks the girl wants to see people like him on the student council as soon as possible. He knows that freshmen have certain problems joining, so he believes that is exactly why they came up with this plan. Cecilia looks away. She says that in any case she will wait for them tomorrow in the student council office. She asks the question, did the sister and brother understand everything? Alice clarifies if she is sure she will fit in. Cecilia approaches her sister, puts food in front of her nose and says she needs to be more confident. She reminds her the sister is in the strongest freshman class. Iris stood in front of Jason. The girl suggested they start training. She told the boy that he needs to release all the magical power from the center of his own body. The man releases magical power and asks the girl if he is doing everything correctly. Iris says everything is wrong. Jason raises his hands and asks, so what is the right way then? Iris laughs and says that the boy has no inner feeling at all. Jason is angry and asks how he can succeed at all if the girl constantly comments on everything. Iris asks what kind of boy just said that. Jason replies that the girl is a terrible teacher. Faye and Melia approached them. Faye looked surprised. Jason and Iris had been training since morning. Melia just greeted classmates. Jason and Iris also greeted the boy and girl. Jason added that they have very little time. Faye turns to the girl and invites her to practice as well. He asks what level she has reached. Melia decides to show. The girl throws her hand forward and releases magical powers. Faye is stunned. The girl can already release magical power with 3 fingers. The girl remembered 6 years ago she could only release magical power from her thumb. Faye looks at the girl and smiles. He recalls how she trained every day. The boy notices her magical power is a bit clouded, but the purity is extremely high. From somewhere far away he hears Iris shouting Gazen. She asks how long he needs to be explained to before he finally understands. Then Faye looks at Iris and notices the purity of her magical power is still not too low, but she can control it without any difficulty. Faye approaches Melia and asks, "Give me your hands." The girl is embarrassed but still extends her palms. The boy squeezes her hands with his. Iris blushes and screams, asking what Melia and Faye are doing. Gason also blushes and says they are not allowed to flirt in class. Faye says they misunderstood everything. Faye says he will release his magical power gradually so that it enters Melia evenly. He asks the girl to slowly merge with the flow, then he asks if she understood everything. She agrees. Faye and Melia hold hands. Their bodies are enveloped by magic. Sparks appear in Iris's eyes and she says, "This is incredible." She says she has never seen such beautiful magical power. Gason blushes and says he has never seen such a sensual power. Then Iris hits him and continues to watch the magical power of her classmates. Melia looks at her hands and thinks that Faye's magical power is incredible. She felt the power flowing evenly through her body and decided to direct her own power following Faye's magical power. The boy was extremely surprised when the girl stretched her hand forward and was able to release magic with 5 fingers. The girl shouts to Faye that she succeeded. She is overwhelmed with delight. Faye begins to congratulate the girl. He says that if it continues like this, in a week she will be able to use magic that will allow her to enchant her body. Hyzen at this stage says that he wants to sleep, and Iris recalls that man came even earlier than her and asks if he is okay. She does not remember him ever appearing so early. Gazen turns to the girl, points to himself with his thumb and says that he should not be underestimated. He had a countermeasure. Iris asks what exactly. The guy says that he will just sleep during the lesson. He thinks that will be enough. Iris says Hyzen always sleeps during the lesson, so nothing will change. Jison laughs and says that he can understand Aaron's lessons without problems even in his sleep. Suddenly, a male voice is heard, asking if everything is really as Jison said. Jison's face darkens and he stops laughing. The homeroom teacher asks if the boy really should get the highest score on the test in that case. The homeroom teacher approaches Jison and grabs him by the shoulder when the boy tries to leave, citing sudden matters that arose. Jison says that it's time for him to return to class and the homeroom teacher demands that he stop. The homeroom teacher looks angrily at the boy and says, if he does not get the highest score on the next test, he will have a special extra lesson after school. After training, Gazen suggested to Faye to go and grab a bite, but the guy said he needed to go to the student council, so he refused. Faye approached the student senate office. He recalled the words of that girl about needing to choose 2 mages. He decided that Leela would not be there after all. It was lunchtime. The man decides to figure it out and knocks on the door. He enters the room and sees the girl. Leela laughs and says that Faye came late. The man asks if the girl really knew he would come. Leela answers that she did. Leela points to the list of students and asks if this guy really came to look at him. Faye replies that he wanted to study the list. Leela laughs and asks how he can choose someone if he just came to school. She laughs. At that moment, Faye thought, if the girl herself understands this, then why did she make him choose? Willis smiles and asks if he can tell her. She says the boy could choose someone from his classmates. She asks if the boy has thought about it. He has not yet had time to get to know everyone well. Leela says that the boy is always too serious and puts things strangely. She says that if the boy starts thinking about mages, he won't make it to the end of the lessons. Faye was about to say something else, but Leela interrupted him and asked if she could do it for him. Faye asked if the girl really wanted that. Leela says that most of the information about students is stored in her head. She tells the boy not to worry and assures him that she would never choose someone who could end up in a disadvantageous position for the clergy. Faye asks if he can rely on her in that case. The girl replies that he can. Leela claps her hands and says that dinner is not over yet. She asks if the boy wants to have dinner with her. Faye refuses and says that she prefers to have dinner in a comfortable setting, so because of this he says no. Faye goes to the door and says he is going after Leela. Leela is angry at him and says they will meet again after school. A real commotion began. Bram was asking where Faye was. Everyone was bombarding him with questions, what he was doing and why he was shouting at the top of his lungs. Alice tried to calm her brother, but he did not listen. Bram grabbed Jisun by the collar and was about to hit him, but suddenly heard Bram's voice. Bram entered the living room and sat at the table with the girls. He asked what had happened. Iris looked at Bram and also wondered why he was acting so aggressively. Gaizan looked at his friend and joyfully shouted his name. Bram was still holding him by the collar. He turned his head and fiercely stared at his brother. Jisun approaches Faye and asks him to do something about his brother. Bram asks why Jisun despises him so much. Iris intervenes and shouts that everyone is tired of listening to them. Faye looks at Bram and asks what happened. He says that he is a spiritual summoner, then he asks why he cannot manifest his spirit. Braun approaches Faye and says that he will do it easily. Faye asks what happened. He replies Braun annoys him. Bram laughs and says that it is time to announce important news. He says that he joined the student council. Faye turns and looks at his brother with no interest at all. Bram has no idea what to do. Bram says that actually it is still a student organization under the student council, but it was created especially for him so that he could officially join. Faye still responds with no interest. Bram raises his index finger and says that members of this organization can decide for themselves when to release the spirit or something else. He assures the boy whatever he does to Faye, nothing will happen to him. Faye says the opposite. She is sure, in the worst-case scenario, Bram could lose his qualifications. She reminds that the same problem had already occurred with Bram. Alice approaches the boy and takes him away. Bram continues and says that for now he will not do anything to Faye, but promises to deal with him within a day. Faye looks at his brother and sister as they leave. He feels that his brother has not fully recovered yet. Faye understands Bram will also join the student council organization, and now he likes it even less. In the kingdom, 3 dukes bow directly before their majesty. One of the dukes says that they cannot allow even members of 7 to do as they please. He considers it impossible. The second duke replies, if the guilty one from 7 is punished, the rebellion will definitely break out. The third duke believes if he is punished too lightly, people will decide that his majesty is afraid. And he convinces everyone that after this not only will his majesty stop being respected, but the reputation will be completely disgraced. One of the dukes turns to the man sitting on the throne and asks what orders he will give regarding the Bonnet family. At that moment, Faye returned to the classroom. A girl immediately approached him and was glad that the boy had returned. Faye interrupted her and said that after class he would have to go to another place. He asked the girl to first return to the building and gave her the keys. Elia says that he does not need to worry about her. She assures that she will just wait. Faye raises his hand and refuses. He is afraid that the conversation with Leela will drag on for a long time. As much as he wants to finish sooner, he cannot make the girl wait for so long. Faye approaches the student council door and thinks about how much trouble Bram has caused him. He knocks and hears a girl's voice, come in. Faye goes inside and sees, in the student council, besides him and Leela, Cecilia and 2 other students whom he did not know were sitting. Leela smiles and says that they were waiting for one boy. Faye asks if he is late. Leela winks and replies that he came on time. She says that all this time she was just impatiently waiting for him. Cecilia asks the boy to carefully watch the 2 magicians, whom the president specially selected. The boy introduces himself and gives his name and surname Graham Nelson. He says he is a first-year student in his 2nd year. He is glad to meet them. Next to him on the right sat a girl. She also introduced herself and said her name was Celia Riley. She said she was also studying in the 2nd year. He was pleased to meet the boy. Faye also introduces himself and bows. Graham says he knows Faye. The boy asks confusedly what that means. Graham tells how he and Celia saw a conflict outside the school. They had no idea they would witness a magician defeating a spiritualist. It thrilled him to pieces. Faye understands what the boy is talking about. Celia adds and says that they are from Bonnet territory. Faye asks what the girl means. Graham says that they generally understand her situation, but they are forbidden to say anything, so they ask the boy not to worry. Faye looks at Graham and Celia in confusion. He hesitated about what to think of them. He had doubts about the new members of the student organization. Leela turns around and asks what is wrong with Bram. She says many people are late. Graham jumps up sharply and asks if Bram will really also join the student organization. Leela says yes. Faye wonders how Graham could so easily name the son of a high-ranking official. It seems strange and unnatural to him. He looks away and decides that it is not that important. Graham turns around and asks if the girl knows what Bram did. Leela says that other students and teachers advised the boy. Leela says that it is in the student council that true magical abilities are crucial, so Bram will not be able to make any claims here. Faye looks closely at the tense Graham and Celia. He understands. For them, as magicians, it is difficult to interact with a spiritologist, especially one like Bram. Faye always feels this chasm between magicians and spiritologists. Graham turns around and looks at Faye, thinking that she might be their only hope. Graham asks Faye to contact him immediately if any problem arises. He says, even if he decides that nothing can be done about it anymore, Graham will still find a way. Celia supports him. Faye looks at the guys, then smiles and thanks them. He was glad to have found loyal comrades. The girl enters the office and apologizes for being late. She says it is nice to meet everyone. Then she introduces herself and says her name is Eunice Cessna. She is a second-year student. Faye looks at the girl and realizes all three have gathered. He assumes that Eunice is a spirit mage. Eunice bows and says she is pleased to meet everyone. Faye, Graham, and Celia introduce themselves. Faye looked at Eunice and noticed she does not act arrogantly. He thinks so. Eunice notices that boy's gaze and asks, "What's wrong?" Faye says, "Everything is fine." Faye hears Bram's voice and immediately tenses up. Bram and Alice enter. Bram kicks the door and apologizes. Alice also enters and quietly apologizes. Bram is happy. The student council president is already here. Bram notices Faye and asks what he is doing in the student council. Faye turns away and blushes. Alice notices her brother. She asks if her brother really also joined the student union organization. Faye replies that he really joined their student organization and reminds them he is no longer their brother. Bram shouts in rage. Bram points at Faye with his hand and curses. He asks why he, being an ordinary mage, joined the student organization. Layla smiles and asks if he really said that. She says that their student organization will also have 3 mages. Bram gets even angrier. Bram says he is completely against it. He asks why a student union for the strong needs regular mages. Graham sharply slams his palm on the table and asks what that man said. Layla feigns a shudder at Bram's words. She says, if the sorcerers are weak, it means Bram lost to one of those weak ones. Bram starts making excuses and insists he was caught off guard. Layla says that even if the man was confused, that was still his true level of magical ability. Bram raises his fist and stops his swing. He shouts that he is against this, then he is ready to hit Faye. Faye looks at the boy in complete confusion. Graham appears right in front of him. He stands between them and covers Faye with his body, intercepting Bram's fist. Bram asks who Graham is. He demands that he let go of his hand. Graham refuses. He says he cannot just stand aside and watch his comrade being attacked. Bram gasps in surprise as soon as he hears about his comrade. He asks if Graham is really a mage too. Graham says, the very right option, and immediately starts shouting that he is in pain. Graham lets go of Bram. Faye thanks this boy and Graham asks him not to worry. Bram falls. Alice approaches and asks if her brother is okay. Bram demands that the girl shut up. Graham approaches Abram and says he is acting terribly towards his older brother. Bram shouts that Faye is just a stranger to him. Graham frowns and says he hates terrible people like Bram. He declares, if Bram touches Faye, he will never forgive him again. As soon as Faye hears this, her eyes open wide. Graham raises his index finger and points it at Graham. He says this is Bond's problem, so Graham should not interfere. Graham replies that he managed to defeat Bram in 1 second. Graham growls angrily and demands the boy to be quiet. A drop of water falls on Bram. And then a whole stream of water pours down on him from above. The man falls silent. Everyone turns around and notices that Leela is standing with her hand outstretched. She says she will not allow such nonsense again. Bram apologizes and says he is just losing self-control. He glances at Faye. She smiles tensely and starts getting angry again. Bram approaches the student council president and says he heard there is a tradition of duels between students at the school. He asks for permission to duel fight. Leela says such duels used to be held often. Bram shouts that he was right. Bram points at Faye and asks what he thinks about it. Faye asks what it all means. Bram says that guy will definitely lose next time. He asks if that guy is afraid of him. Bram looks at Faye with a smile. Faye looks away and says she agrees to the duel. Leela replies that then they will meet at practical training. Alice pushes the boy toward the exit. He finally says that this time he will definitely defeat Faye. He insists that Faye must not even think about running away. Cecilia watches the situation in shock. Graham approaches the president and asks if Lee Loeb will really allow Bram to join the student organization. The girl says that boy does not always behave like that. Graham asks what that means. Leela sits down at the table and says that others barely saw the other side of Bram. Bram still does not understand what the student council president means. Layla turns to the boy and says that Bram is quite strong but does not attack people of higher rank, but in front of Faye, he completely lost control. Leela says that's why she needs them both to be within reach. She claims that no one is forcing them to join the student council next year. Faye asks if that is exactly why Leela so desperately asked him to agree. Leela says she knows, it's not very polite towards Faye, but that's exactly what she was thinking about. Leela sighed and said she thinks this will at least help drive away Bonetzi's darkness. Faye blushed and was glad that the girl really came up with that. Faye considered Leela just a girl in good shape, and Leela thought that the boy came up with something indecent. Faye left the student council and wondered if Melia was waiting for him. He entered the classroom and saw the girl and realized she was waiting for him. Melia joyfully called out the boy's name. Melia runs up to him and asks if he managed to settle all matters. Faye looks away and says he still has unresolved issues. Felix falls and looks away, blushing. Melia asks what happened. Faye says he needs a little more time. The man asks the girl to return first. Melia replies she will go with him anyway. She says there is no point in going back to the classroom again. Faye refuses and tries to explain to the girl that she needs to go back alone, but Melia does not listen to the man and says she will go with him. Eventually, Faye agrees. Faye and Melia head to the duel together. Faye and Melia arrive at the practice room. Faye sees Gaizan and Bram holding each other by the collar, while Alice and Iris stand aside. Gaizan immediately cheerfully greets Faye. Faye turns to Gaizan and Iris asking what they are doing in the duel. They reply that they were practicing body enchantments. Then they ask what Faye and Melia are going to do. Faye was a little confused, so he didn't manage to answer the question. Iris answers for him and says that there will be a duel between Bram and Faye. That's why they needed a room for practical training. Iris connects and asks what kind of duel it is. Faye replies that it's a regular one. Iris freezes at such an answer from the boy. Faye says that they will still take the practice room. Jisun sighs quietly. Faye looks away and apologizes for interrupting the boy's training. Hyson says it's a minor matter. For now, they will just check the safety in the training room. Bram and Faye stand opposite each other. Layla announces the duel will last until one of them admits defeat. She says that the boys can use restorative magic but will be responsible for every injury, so she asks them to fight restrainedly. Bram's thoughts stop at the words about injuries. Layla announces the start of the duel. Bram shouts that the first victory will be his and launches fireballs at Faye. Faye manages to dodge and tries to enchant his body. Asen says that Faye's magic is beautiful. Melia rejoices and replies that one could expect exactly that from the boy. Asen turns to the girl and asks if she is worried. Melia smiles and says that Faye cannot lose. Bram smiles and says that after all, lower levels of magic do not affect him. Faye says Bram will not be able to defeat him unless he uses at least higher level magic. Bram smiles and asks if the boy really wants to see him use high-level magic, and he begins to use high-level magic. Bram used high-level fire magic. A blazing wave rushes toward Faye. He sharply widens his eyes in surprise. Faye was stunned. His brother cast the spell without any preparatory movement and even without chanting. Faye decided to use Waternet to hide from Bram's attacks. The magical powers of the boys collided with each other. Everyone was stunned by Faye. Faye swears. All the magic disappears. Faye looks at Bram threateningly and realizes that they are connected. Bram laughs and declares that he will never agree to a draw. Faye sees this is not the end yet. He notices that Bram is using high-level magic without any warnings. Leela says that even the student council staff find it difficult to use magic without chance, let alone high-level magic. She insists that it is simply impossible. Jisun clarifies if this is true. Leela suspects that Faye will have a hard time dealing with something like this. Faye turns on the Waternet again and sees Bram throwing a fiery spear at him. Faye raises a wall of water and deflects the fiery spear. That guy realized it was Bram who suddenly attacked and decided that he would be scared, but Faye firmly put into his head something else: the attacker will not have a pause. Faye found it strange there was no prerequisite for using advanced magic flame wave. He knew, before using fire lance and intermediate magic there are always warning signs. Faye looks at Bram and sees that he is smiling. The man does not understand what is happening. He saw that Brahm uses not only basic magic, high-level magic, and spirit magic, and he does not understand why that guy does not look tired at all. Faye begins to guess what is really going on and listens carefully. And then, when Brahm attacks him again with fire magic, he raises a wall of water in front of himself. Faye feels that someone is behind her, so she turns around. Brahm shouts, relentlessly mocking that boy. Faye sees the wolf spirit behind her. All the onlookers are afraid for the boy. Faye raises her hands and begins to create wind magic and water magic. A stream of water washes away the spirit. Brahm fails to dodge the wind stream. He only widens his eyes in surprise and falls, flying a great distance. Everyone was impressed by the fight. Brahm gets up and scolds. Leela, looking at Faye, says in surprise that he really is a mage. It makes her tremble. Faye approaches Brahm and asks if it is true that he really used the Aron crystal. Faye knew Aron crystal, a rare precious crystal that could store magic. Even if you use the simplest magic, the magical power embedded in it will reveal itself and release a powerful force for the crystal's owner. Since this crystal is extremely rare, only the royal family or the aristocracy closest to it can possess it. Brahm gets up from the ground and asks what difference it makes. He asks where it is said that crystals cannot be used in a duel. He sees the eyes and asks why the boy does not want to fight with his power. Brahm says his power is financial might. He convinces the boy his power is money, cleverness, abilities. Faye asks if she can address the boy with one question. Brahm folds his hands and asks what he is thinking about. Brahm asks whose magic is hidden in the crystal. He smiles and says that the magic in the crystal belongs to their father. Faye remembers the moment when his father called him into the office and said that he was being kicked out of the house. Faye lowers his head and thinks that by surpassing the magic of the Aron crystal, he will be able to defeat his father. The boy understands. Somewhere deep in his chest still lives that feeling he tried to get rid of. He tried to forget it, but he saw more and more clearly. The bitterness is stronger than him. Faye began to feel he must deal with the family that abandoned him. He wanted them to kneel and beg him for mercy. Brahm was frightened when the powerful magic covered the boy. At that moment, Faye said it was time to put an end to all this. He demands that Brahm show him the power of his father. At first, Brahm is scared, but then he focuses and asks why Faye pretends to be so strong and serious. Brahm uses the firenet spell again. He was going to defeat that boy with a flame of fire. Brahm suddenly materializes a bow in his hands and is about to shoot a fiery arrow at Faye. At the same moment, Jisun and Melia shout, calling Faye. Faye again lowered his head and remembered that birthday in the church, how his father demanded that he leave their house and never cross the threshold again. His brain began to flicker with scenes of fleeing from bandits and a fire tornado. Faye again thought that defeating the magical power of the Aron crystal is the same as defeating his father. Faye decided that he would destroy all his tormentors to the end. He sharply raised his hand and summoned a hurricane whirlwind. Brahm smiled and shot a fiery arrow, but the whirlwind of wind swallowed it and carried it further towards the boy. Brahm tensed. The practice room was drowned in silence while everyone, stunned, watched the results of the fight between Brahm and Faye. Standing right in front of the huge hole that Brahm made when the wind knocked him down, Brahm lay under the rubble of the wall. Leela was delighted that Brahm destroyed the wall again, and she found it provocative. Faye asks why do it if it confirms his victory. Leela says that the victory of this guy is obvious to everyone anyway. Faye turns to Layla and asks if the mages will continue to participate in their student organization. Layla says they will since Faye won. Suddenly, Brahm gets up and says he hasn't lost yet. Layla turns to the boy and says he looks pathetic. Brahm swears, then wonders why he always loses. Brahm started shouting louder and asked several times why Faye always outpaces him. Faye wanted to say something, but Brahm interrupted him and continued. He can't lose to someone like him. He is sure that Faye was just lucky to be born with talent. Brahm shouts that on his birthday he would like that guy to be taken away already. Faye looks at him gloomily. Suddenly, Alice's voice sounds. She says that this is completely untrue. Everyone turns and looks at the girl. Alice says that Brahm probably didn't know. Faye trains to exhaustion every day from morning till late at night. She starts crying and says you can't call guys hard work when it's just training. Faye lowers his head. Faye asks what they should do about the wall. Leela says there's no need to worry, she will ask to have it repaired. The boy thinks about the student council president. Suddenly, Faye approaches Melia, takes her hands, and says they need to go. The girl is confused but still follows the boy. Jason tried to stop the boy, but Faye apologized to him and said that he was very tired. Faye was walking down the street with Melia. The girl asked the boy to stop. Faye turned around and asked what happened. The girl said nothing happened. Edge just pointed to her hand. The fairy looked at the girl and asked what was wrong with her hand. The girl blushed and closed her eyes. Faye looked down and saw he was still holding the girl's hand. He suddenly let go and apologized wide-eyed. Melia was embarrassed. Faye began to apologize and said that he had grabbed the girl's hand without realizing it. The girl replied that it was nothing serious, there was no need to worry. Faye turns around and decides that the girl is very tired. He asks if Melia is hungry, then says she needs to take a bath. The boy promises to draw her a bath and walks away. A few minutes later, Melia was standing in the shower under powerful streams of water, and Faye sat on the bed and sat for a while. Faye lay face down on the bed and began kicking it. He decided that the girl thought he was strange. He was tormented by the question of what exactly he was doing. Faye looked up and focused seriously on figuring out what he was doing. He remembered his recent duel with Brahm. The boy realizes he used magic and allowed anger and hatred to control him. He admits that since then he has not matured. Faye lies on his back and thinks, after all, he is no different from Brahma. Faye remembers how her sister Alisa told Brahm that their brother had been training hard for years. Faye covers her eyes with her hand and realizes it was not supposed to be like this. Faye thought that Alice could not hate him because it was his parents who kicked him out of the family. Faye presses his head with his hands, then turns to his side and notices a ball on the bookshelf. In the morning, Gasson and Iris trained again. Gasson fell to the floor and said he was very tired. Iris approached the boy and said that now he had learned to enchant his own body. She asked if he could further increase the purity of his magical power. Hyzen folds his arms and says that he is for quantity, not quality. Iris replies, this guy cannot compete with just that. She wonders what he is even talking about. Fee and Melia approach the boys. Fee greets and wishes everyone good morning. Melia just smiles. Iris raises her voice and says that they came very late. She asked Faye and Melia not to leave her alone with Jisun this morning. Jisun begins to get upset. Faye laughs. Hyzen notices that the boy is in a good mood. He turns around and says that they need to continue training. Faye approaches the young man and calls him. Jisun asks what happened. Faye asks if Hyzen wants to ask him something about the duel. Hyzen replies, why would he even want to ask about it? He clarifies he wants Faye to ask about the duel. Faye says no. Jisun turns fully to the boy and asks if it wouldn't be better to just leave everything as it is. Faye asks what all this means. Jisun says that he is really interested, but it all looks too confusing. Jason smiles and says that instead of forcing him to say something that is not quite true, it is 10 times better to just leave everything as it is. Melia returns to Faye and asks if it is time for them to leave. Faye agrees with the girl and follows her. Iris approaches Gazin and says that he sometimes chooses the right words. Gazin asks what the girl is talking about. He declares that he is a good guy. Everyone started smiling because they decided that Hyzen was funny. Jason, Faye, Melia, and Aureus returned to the classroom. Jason sat at the desk and tried not to fall asleep to avoid extra lessons. He focused all his magical power. The class teacher turned around and saw that Jisun had fallen asleep. He decided it was time to start preparing methodological materials for extra lessons. The man turns to Faye. The boy asks what the teacher wanted. Aaron ordered him to watch Hyzen's training in his free time. Faye asks why him specifically. Aaron knows he has a lot to do but still asks him for help because Jisun does not change at all in any of his classes. The teacher thought if Faye has a serious talk with him, he will finally listen. Aaron says that training for mages is extremely important. He asks if the boy can do it for Jason. Faye says that maybe he is capable of something. Aaron replies that he relies on the boy. Faye turns around and looks at the boy with displeasure. Jessica enters the office and asks if this guy can come to her for a few minutes. He immediately turns to the director. The director hands Faye a letter for the boy and says she needs to have a very important conversation with him. She asks the boy to follow her. Faye recognizes the seal on the letter. Bram stood in his father's office. The man asked his son to explain himself. Bram says that when he found out Faye would also join the student organization, he couldn't leave it like Thaith challenged her to a duel and lost. Mother asks how Braum could lose to some pathetic mage. She asks if Faye was following someone stronger. Alice intervenes in the conversation and says that Faye fought honestly and did not deceive anyone. Everyone turns their gaze to the girl. Alice asks what she said. Her father says that her brother is no longer here. He convinces her Faye is a stranger from school, and he orders her not to call him her brother even by accident. Alice looks anxiously at her father. Then the man turns to Bram and asks why he lost. Bram says it didn't happen that way. The man looks away and says he knew he would have to fight a simple mage, so he cannot show him all his power. Girls look tensely at their brother. The father asks Bram to tell the truth. The boy tries to convince him that he is not lying. And the father asks what happened to Aaron's crystal. The boy tenses and says he used it for magical research. The father looks at the boy for a while, then turns his gaze to the girl and asks her to tell him the truth. Alice explains that Bram used Erin's crystal and spirit mania, but Faye turned out to be stronger and Bram lost. The father asks Bram if everything really happened as Alice said. At that moment, someone knocks on the office door. Alex asks, "May I come in?" Armin enters and apologizes. Alex asks what happened. Armin replies, "His Majesty the King's decree has arrived." Alex exclaims in horror. The man hands the letter to Alex. He opens the letter and reads, "Alex Bone, Audie Bone, Cecilia Bone, Armin Boswell, Alice Bone, Brom Bone must arrive at the royal castle of the Kingdom of Armano exactly in 10 days at 12 o'clock noon." Alex clenched the letter in his hand as tightly as he could. He was furiously angry. Everything happened just when they started having problems with Faye. The man was sure he should have dealt with that guy himself. At that time, Faye was standing before the director and reading a letter that said he had to arrive at the castle of the Kingdom of Armando exactly in 10 days at 12 noon. The boy realized one of the most decisive days of his fate had come. The director says that this is correct. She turns around and takes out a box with a costume for Faye. She says she prepared festive clothes for the boy. Faye looks at the girl with surprise. Faye raises his hands, tries to say something, but the director interrupts him and asks if that means the boy has a costume. Faye gives up and answers that he does not have a costume. The director says Faye cannot go to the royal capital in ordinary school uniform. She asks him not to worry and to accept the gift. Faye thanks the woman for the gift. She lifts the box and examines the costume. She wonders how many years have passed since the last time she wore a formal suit. The director says that in 9 days the carriage will arrive at the main gates for him. Faye asks why not in 10. The director smiles and answers, "From school to the royal capital, half a day's ride." Juana was hanging laundry and suddenly turned around and fell silent. She felt something strange. Leaves fell from the tree. The girl caught one and saw it was rotten. She realized the day had come when Faye sets off to the royal castle. Lana raises her hands and thinks about how to help her son solve the problem with the trip to the kingdom. Late in the evening, Faye tried on the costume. Melia was beaming. She said the boy looked very handsome. Faye was very shy. Melia sat on the floor and thought about what she needed to finish for her costume. The boy looked at the girl questioningly. Melia approaches Faye and puts a tie on him. While the girl was tying it around the boy's neck, she said that without it he simply could not. Faye looked very confused, so he asked the girl to wait a little. Melia looked up and screamed, then stepped back, apologizing. Faye says that nothing terrible happened. Hai remembers he will be in the royal capital for several days. He asks the girl if she can look after the room. Melia looks at the boy inquisitively. Faye says that she feels at home here. The girl is very shy about the boy's words and this even scares him. Melia sits on the floor and addresses Faye. She asks if he is sure that he is okay. She says that if Faye goes to the royal capital, he will definitely meet the Bonnet family. The boy understands everything. Faye smiles and approaches the girl. He sits opposite her and asks her not to worry. The next morning, Melia and Faye left the building. The girl said it was time for her to go to class. Faye replied that they would see each other again. Melia turned around and headed to the classroom. She blushed and frowned, remembering their conversation about the Bonnet family, then turned again and looked at Faye as he walked away. The girl turns around and shouts to the fairy, wishing her luck. The boy turns around and smiles. Then Faye turns around again and looks ahead. He decided that it was time to get down to business. Melia is still standing near the entrance to the school. Faye entered the carriage. Next to the carriage stood a man in glasses and a short little girl. They bowed and said they were waiting for the boy. Then they addressed him by his surname Bonnet. Faye was silent for a moment, then raised her gaze and asked who this man and girl were. The man in glasses bowed and said he was the royal butler. He introduced himself as Trent Mendes and was glad to meet you. Faye shifts her gaze to the short girl, who just begins to speak very confusingly. The girl recovers and states that she is a maid named Anna Mendes. Faye points out that the butler and the maid have the same last name. He asks if that means they are relatives. Trent confirms Cleich and Anna are brother and sister. Trent smiles and asks if they really look so different. He explains that there is no blood relation between them. Trent says that Anna is still very young, so this might make a strong impression on her. He asks the boy to be more lenient with Anna. Anna also asks the boy about this. Everyone gets into the carriage and goes to the castle. Faye says that His Majesty invited him to the royal capital, although maybe he is not who he claims to be. Trent tells the boy not to worry. He explains, when they reach the castle, they will arrange a test to find out if he really is who he says he is. Faye asks what kind of test. Trent says there will indeed be a test, but he himself does not know exactly how it will be conducted. He asks if the boy remembers anything similar when he previously visited the royal castle. Faye asks if Trent is talking about the court mage who wants to study his magical power. Trent says that is exactly what he means. He adds that the Aeron crystal with Faye's magical power is still kept in the royal palace. Faye ponders. Faye knew if someone tried to add their magical power to the Aeron crystal that stores magic, the two forces inside the crystal would repel each other. But if it is Faye, even when he pours magical power into the Aeron crystal, it will not reflect because it was already there, inside the crystal itself. Anna began to fall asleep and leaned on Trent's shoulder. The man tried to wake her up. He apologized to Faye. The boy said it was nothing serious. He was also very tired from the journey. Faye remembered the girl who asked him to repeat the trick. The boy agreed it was an order from Princess Lettuce. Then Lettuce pointed at the boy and told him not to speak so formally. She asked the boy to call her simply Lettuce. Faye stretched out his hands forward and declared that stopping addressing Her Highness was disrespect and a mistake. Then the girl says that even in that case it will be fine. She asserts if the boy does not obey her order, her father will arrest him for offending her. Faye asks why he should be arrested for such nonsense. The boy noticeably loses heart but still does not switch to a formal tone. Ladok says he still needs to practice, but this time she forgave him. Faye thanks the girl. Lettuce asks the boy to repeat the magic spell as quickly as possible. Faye agrees and creates water balls. The princess looks at them and beams, clapping her hands. Faye smiles too. Then Faye tears all the balloons. The girl laughs and says that Faye's magic is wonderful. She convinces him that it is incredible. The boy thanks the girl. Then Lettuce turns to the boy and takes his hands. She asks him to teach her magic. Faye looks away and says that she will soon leave the castle. Lettuce asks when the boy will come again. Faye says he will have to return and report after he signs the contract with the spirit. Lettuce replies, then they should meet in 10 days. The girl shouts that it is a promise. The boy asks what it means. Ladok raises his little finger and says that if Faye breaks the promise, he will have to fulfill one of her wishes. Faye asks why this girl wants so much a boy who will teach her magic. He replies that the court magician teaches much better. Lettuce says she wants him specifically. Faye agrees and the girl screams with delight. Man approaches Lettuce and Faye. Ledius turns around on the spot and immediately exclaims that she is happy to see her brother. Faye greets Prince Julian. Ledius runs up to her brother and says that Faye promised to teach her magic. Faye is stunned. Julian approaches the fairy and apologizes for all the trouble his sister caused him. The fairy says that is not the case at all. Julian said he was looking for Faye because it was time for them to leave. Faye bowed and thanked the boy for the news. Julian also thanked him. Ladok hid behind his brother, then a blush covered her face and she began to shout that Faye definitely has to keep his promise. Faye smiles and promises to teach her magic. The stroller continued on its way. Trent suddenly says that it seems they have already arrived. Faye opens her eyes and sees wonderful landscapes. They arrived at the royal capital, Armando. The boy blushes with admiration. Trent and Anna smile. Faye turns to Anna and Trent, saying that the city is still overcrowded. A huge crowd gathered around the carriage. Everyone saw the visiting nobles. They say the carriage is still as beautiful as it once was. Faye claims that she is very noticeable to other people. Trent insists that the reason is that they are riding in the royal carriage. The chariot enters the castle. Everyone gets out. Trin asks Faye to follow him. Faye was sitting on the sofa and Anna was carrying tea to the boy. Suddenly she stumbled and the cup of tea on the tray began to fall. Trent manages to stop the cup of tea that was flying down. He apologizes to the boy. Faye says that nothing bad happened. Anna thanks Trent for everything. Faye looks at the girl in confusion and wonders what it means. The door to the room where Faye was sitting opens. She is called. The boy immediately shifts his gaze to those who entered and sees Lettuce and her brother Julian. Lettuce starts crying, then rushes to the boy and hugs him tightly. She says she missed him so much Faye doesn't even have time to recover. Faye looked at Julian. He covered his face with his palm and looked at her slyly. This made Faye even more uncomfortable. Julian says he understands. Faye and Lettuce want to enjoy their meeting after so many years. Then he adds that they need to settle the matter with the Aeron crystal. Faye agrees with him. Trent brings the Aeron crystal and gives it to Faye. The man reaches out to it and begins to release his magical powers. The crystal flashed and spread magical energy. Julian was glad that the crystal resonated. He says they all witnessed. Faye is the very representative of the Banat family. The girl is happy that Faye could not lose to the demon. Then the fairy is led through the castle corridor. Trent says the boy had a hard day, offers him to rest, and the man escorts the boy to his room. Suddenly one of the rooms opens and the entire Bonnet family comes out of it. Faye looks at the parents, sisters, and brother in horror. The Bonnet family gloomily stared at the former relative. It is here that Faye remembers how he was expelled from the family. Faye looks at the father and says they haven't seen each other for a long time. The man asks who this boy is. He replies that he is too busy to remember every commoner. Faye asks if Alex heard anything about the commoner being his son. She wonders if that man remembers what he did to him. Alex asks how the boy dares to so boldly despise him. Faye looks at his entire homeland with a gloomy grimace. He understands his father has now truly started treating him like a commoner. Faye secretly hoped that his father at least regretted what he had done to his son. The boy overestimated his father's humanity, and he decides now there will definitely be no mercy. Anna turns to Faye and asks if he is okay. The boy smiles and says that everything is fine. Trent and Anna bow to the boy and assume that he is very tired. They point to the room and ask Faye to rest. The boy thinks they are the maid and the butler, enters the room and closes the door. Anna tells her brother that she hopes Faye is all right. Trent is also worried because the boy, at only 13, has already been through so much he hopes nothing will happen to him. Faye lay on the bed and could not fall asleep. He remembered that this had happened before. The boy remembers how 8 years ago he spent his first night in the royal castle. That day he looked out the window. Somewhere near the end, the boy noticed Lettuce on the street. She was shaking all over. He went outside and approached her. Faye immediately threw a cloak over the girl's shoulders. Lettuce immediately recognized the boy. Faye was embarrassed and the girl frowned. Faye fell to his knees before the girl and introduced himself. He said that he was the son of Duke Bon. "Let's apologize," she asked why the boy was on the street so late. Faye turned away. He was ashamed to admit that it was his first night in the royal castle, so he could not fall asleep. Faye told how he saw the girl in the window and immediately decided to go to her. Lettuce laughed. Faye asks what the girl is doing outside. The girl replies that she just wanted to hide from strangers for a while. Letty says that the same thing happens every day. She is tired of living among people. It seemed like nonsense to her. Ledius raises his eyes to the sky and says that when he looks at it, he forgets about all unimportant things. Faye says he somewhat understands the girl's feelings. Faye was the Duke's eldest son, so many aristocrats try to please him with flattery. Letties and Faye could not help but notice. All the boasting directed at them was actually just a way to take advantage of the situation. Letties looks at the boy in shock and asks if he really felt the same. Faye is confused how best to respond. He says that he probably does not think that way at all. Faye talks about how he has long felt pressure from people when they called him wonderkind. Lettuce asks if the boy has something he would like to do. Faye asks what he wants. Lettuce says that is exactly what she is interested in. She asks again. Faye thinks, then he looks at the girl with a smile and says that he wants to live up to his parents' expectations. Letties asks the boy again, and Faye looks at the girl and does not understand why she reacted that way. Letties did not expect such an answer. The girl gets up from the ground and says that she wants to be with her beloved. She wants to walk with him. Faye asks if this is really what the girl wants. It seems to him both simple and, at the same time, complicated. Laduk leans forward, closes her eyes. She begins to tremble and says she is cold. Faye approaches the girl and uses fire magic. Lettuce says she feels warm. She asks if it is really fire magic. Faye asks if it is true that the girl is seeing magic for the first time. She says she has seen magic before, but only from afar. Lettuce asks what Faye would like to do. The boy does not understand the girl's question. She means who he would like to become for her, and the boy still does not fully grasp the essence of this request. Faye blushes and says he would like to have a friendly relationship with the princess. He hopes that she will support him in the future. Lettuce was completely surprised. She looked at the boy, laughed, and said that Faye is really very funny. She insists that no one talks like that. The boy asks what that means. Lettuce agrees and suggests building a friendly relationship, and then the girl laughs. Faye remembered how Lettuce laughed when they met in the castle garden 8 years ago. The boy realized memories from 8 years ago no longer have anything in common with the present reality. Since then, everything around him has completely changed. Faye believes that he himself has not changed. Faye leaves the room and sees Lettuce standing by the fountain. She looks worried. The boy goes outside, the boys return and look at Faye. He looks at the girl, at first with surprise, then he approaches closer. Lettuce sincerely rejoices that Faye still came to her. Faye says he feels bad because the girl predicted his actions. Lettuce folds her hands and rejoices that now they can talk calmly. The man tries to say something, although they essentially have nothing to discuss. Lettuce begins to get angry and says that they have something to talk about. 6 years have already passed. The young man says even if the girl asks what happened to him during these 6 years, he won't be able to tell anything interesting. He lived in the forest all this time. Lettuce asks why he lived in the forest. Faye says that he was saved by a woman named Lana. He replies that she was the one who took him in. Lettuce orders the boy to stop. The girl asks in amazement how Faye lived with the woman for 6 years. She clarifies, did they live alone in the forest? Faye confirms. Lettuce frowned and asked what kind of relationship he had with Lana. Faye thought, not understanding what the girl meant, then said, Lana was his mother. Lettuce instantly changes. She rejoices and says that the boy can forget about her question. Faye doesn't understand anything but still agrees with the girl. Lettuce stops and says that she has a few things she wants to talk to him about. She mentions a promise. Faye looks at the girl with fear. Lettuce turns around and smiles at him. Lettuce shifts her gaze to the boy. She wants to talk about his family. She says that family was supposed to become his main ally in life. She says it should be that way at any moment. Lettuce insists. That's how it was supposed to be 6 years ago. She doesn't know the details of what happened in the Bonnet family but still wants to support the boy. Faye says that it's normal. He says, even if he has no blood relatives, he has a person he can call and consider family. Lettuce tries to say something else. At that moment, Faye thinks that he doesn't know how long he and Lana will remain a family. Lettuce sharply grabs the boy's hands. Faye looks at the girl stunned. Lettuce says that no matter what happens, she will always be on the boy's side. She promises him someday she will show him what a real family should be. Lettuce raises her gaze and her face comes very close to Faye. The boy asks what that means. The girl blushes and pushes him away, saying that it means nothing. Faye approaches the girl and hugs her. Lettuce is shy and tries to stop the boy. At that moment, the boy thanks her. Alex pounds his fist on the table and swears. He says he hates Faye. He is angry and the real mother of Faye. Alex was furious because Faye threatened the status of their family. Faye wakes up when the sun begins to shine in his face. He turns around and says good morning to Melia, but in a moment he realizes he is not in the school dormitory, he is in the royal castle. Faye felt a strange excitement. The fact that Melius was walking beside him already seemed familiar to him. Suddenly someone knocks on the door and asks if he is woken up. At first the boy is scared. And then he goes to the door and sees Anna. He greets her in the morning and wishes her a good morning. Anna asks what the boy thinks about breakfast. He has already had a snack but still does not refuse the girl. Faye sat at the table covered with a pile of various food. Trent stood nearby. The man asked what he was going to do after breakfast. Faye thought and hesitated with the answer. Anna was carrying a tray with food, and at that moment Faye said that there were still a few hours before the arrival of the viewers. Faye knew that he could even leave the castle for a few hours. Trent apologized and asked Faye to spend all that time in the castle. Faye thought about it. Faye asks Trent if there is a place in the castle where magic can be used. Trent says he will take this boy after breakfast. At that moment Anna runs up to them, stumbles, and drops the tray with a cup of tea again. Trent approaches the door and says that this is the entrance to training room number 2. He adds that the boy will be able to use magic and peace there. Faye thanks the man. Trent bows and says then he will leave so as not to disturb that boy. Faye goes inside and begins to perform magic. First, he decides to enchant his own body. Trent hesitated before leaving, looked and saw Faye using magic. It impressed him. He thought casting spells on the body without singing and outside the magic system was not so easy. Faye was guessing what would happen if Alex approached and fought him, what time to take and which magic to use. Faye thinks that this will not be like their fight with Bram, but suddenly the boy remembers how he used the power of the 5 imperial beasts. Faye decided that all this was nonsense. He recalls he could not control the power of the 5 emperor beasts, so he sealed them. He could not rely on their might when it suited him. The boy curses. Suddenly Lettuce enters the training room. She greets the guy. Faye asks what the girl is doing in this room. Lettuce says she came in here by accident. Faye asks how such a thing could happen by accident. Smiling, she approaches and asks if that guy really decided to practice magic. Faye replies that he just happened to have a lot of free time. The girl looks closely at the guy and asks if everything is okay. She smiles and asks if this boy will show her a trick with the water ball. The boy remembers that simple trick and then asks if the girl can do it herself. The girl thinks the boy forgot about that trick. Faye says she remembers. He decided the girl can handle it herself because it's entry-level magic. The girl opens her mouth in surprise, then frowns. Lettuce loudly shouts and swears about that guy. Faye does not understand what exactly is happening. The girl moves away from the boy. She is very angry. Faye tries to stop her and asks what he said. Faye did not understand why the girl was offended. He wondered if she really could not use magic. Faye thinks that the girl should have already learned magic since there was a court magician in the kingdom. He again wonders what went wrong. Anna approaches Faye, turns around and asks what happened. Anna says it's time to go out to the audience. She says she will fix the boy's tie. Faye says he can manage on his own. Anna starts crying and asks if he is really afraid that she won't manage. Faye says that's not the point, and the boy eventually agrees. He sits on the floor so the girl can comfortably reach the tie. Anna approaches the boy and tries to tie his tie but doesn't understand how to do it. She tried different options. After several attempts, Anna screams that she managed to tie the boy's tie. Faye thanks the girl. Then Anna suddenly jumped up and shouted that she forgot about the perfume. Faye tried to stop the girl but didn't make it. Trent approaches Faye and helps him with the tie. The man apologizes for Anna. Faye says nothing bad happened. Anna runs up to Faye and pulls. She brought the perfume. Trent closes his eyes and says the girl brought oil. He asks how the girl could confuse perfume with oil. Trent calls the girl to follow him and says they will go look for the perfume together. Anna asks Faye to wait a little longer. Faye looks at the girl in complete confusion but still agrees to wait. He sees how happy Anna is that Trent is helping her. The boy smiles and thinks they really are good brother and sister. Once 5 heroes won great victories in the war against demons. The 5 great ones, having received the status of dukes, became one of the 7 most influential families of Armando. Besides them, there were those who had no special military merits for the kingdom. 2 families that provided the 5 heroes with colossal logistical support in exchange for the title of duke. Among these 2 families, there was one not quite ordinary. The Dirk family is a special house among the aristocracy. They have another title besides the status of one of the 7 great. The king thanked the heroes for saving the country. He granted each of them the status of duke. Said they could ask him for anything. When the war with the demons ended, everyone wanted a huge piece of land for themselves. The whole family asked for land and thanked the king. The man returned to Dirk and asked what the girl wanted. He thought that she, like everyone else, would want land. The girl replied that she did not need land. Then the king asked what she would like to receive in that case. The girl answered that all she wanted was to live quietly and peacefully with her little daughter, whose father had been taken away. She asked for a small plot of forest and a small house, and said she needed nothing more. The king was interested. The girl did not ask for money, status, or honor. He wanted to talk to her later. Since then, once a year the girl came to the castle for an audience with the king. Only the king and the most powerful people in the country know what the deity's certs look like, as do some of the 7 officials who took part in the war. 10 years ago, the same girl from the family died. The little girl sat by her coffin and wept. After the mother's death, the girl took over managing the household. The girl lived alone in her little house in the forest until one day she met a little boy there. They sat on the sofa very tense. Trent entered the room. He tells him that the king has called him. Faye looks at the man with surprise. Trent smiles and asks if Faye's heart is ready. Faye is confused and does not know what to answer him. Faye approaches the door and Trent informs the knights at the entrance that Faye Bonnet has arrived. The knights let her in. Faye opens the door and enters. He sees the king sitting on the throne. And his whole family immediately turned and looked at him with a dark expression. The king rejoices at the appearance of the fairy and says that everyone is finally here. The entire Bond family looks at the boy. Alex does not take his eyes off the son. Faye also responds with a gaze from behind the shopping center windows. The boy enters and says that Faye Bonnet arrived by order of His Majesty King Alfred Armando. Faye goes further down the corridor and kneels. The entire Bonnet clan looks at him with obvious displeasure. The king says that they have not seen each other for a long time. The man asks if it is true. Faye replies, 6 years have passed. The king is surprised at how much time has passed and says that the boy has grown a lot. The fairy raises her gaze to the king and says that he has not changed at all during all this time. The king replies, flattery is good, but he is already too old for it. The king says that he could not even notice how his vassals lie. The king says that since everyone is here, he wants to see confirmation that Faye is really a member of the Bonnet family. Then the man says that he must decide what punishment the Bonnet family will bear, and he adds, it is necessary to determine how to treat Faye in the future. The king decides to start with the last point. He says that from now on the boy officially becomes Fairy Dirk. The boy thinks about the king. Alex stands up and begins to object. He says that Faye is a member of the Bonnet family. He believes that their family should decide how to address Faye. King thinks. He asks if Alex's family will again engage in secret murder and false testimony. Alex tries to justify himself. The king says until now whatever the aristocrats did, the country's turned a blind eye, but he believes that this case goes beyond all limits. He says that Alex committed a terrible act by submitting a false report. King asks Alex if his actions can really be considered treason. Alex is initially overwhelmed by stupor. But after a few seconds he begins to say that the family of their duke must be strong. In his opinion, this is exactly why in this case it was necessary to remove the one who dragged the whole family down with his weakness. He says that this is the policy of their family. The king asks if such politics really flows in the Bonnet family. The man says, even if he acknowledges and accepts everything Alex said, he cannot do anything about the one who dared to utter falsehood. Alex tries to justify himself, but the king interrupts him and asks why he called that man named Faye weak. Alex wonders, how could the weak one defeat Bram in a duel? Alex tries to justify himself again but fails again. The king turns to Alex and says that the duchy has granted him authority, and asks if it would be better if Faye inherited the duke's status instead of Bram. Alex bursts out angrily and says that Bram lost due to his own negligence. He insists that he was defeated not because he had outstanding abilities. The man is confident. In the future, his son Bram will become a spiritual strongman, equal in power to himself. Alex insists that giving the title Duke to a man weaker than him is the same as degrading the title itself. The king says that he simply proposed such a scenario. The king reminds, that man said the future duke should not be weaker than him. He asks if that means the future duke should be stronger than the current Alex. Alex agrees. Suddenly Alex shouts that the fairy will never defeat the wind mage. The king looks at the man in surprise. He asks why they don't have a duel then. The door opens and a girl enters the hall. Faye turns over and is struck by the guest who has just appeared. The king chuckles and asks if the day does not seem strange. He says that the girl came even though it is not the beginning of the year. He addresses her, Lady Lanala. The girl notices Faye and waves to him. The boy could not understand what his foster mother was doing in the castle at that moment. Lana approaches Faye and hugs him. She says he warned her only with positive emotions. Faye blushes and asks the girl to stop. He replies, the king is nearby. The girl laughs and says he is shy. The king and the prince sharply turn and look at Letissa, who is madly angry because of Lana's attitude towards Faye. Lana smiles and Faye becomes even more embarrassed. At that moment, the king clears his throat and asks if they should calm down a bit. The man asks why Lana came to the castle. Lana blushes and says she wanted to see her son. The king asks which son exactly she wanted to see. He does not remember the girl having a son. Lana hugs Faye again and says that he is her son. The boy blushes again. The king is stunned. Healing magic was able to mend Faye's mortal wounds. He guesses how Faye became the half-son of that girl. Alex cuts off the conversation and asks who this girl is. The king recalls Alex had never met Lana before. The king introduces the girl to the man. He says she is the current head of the Derek Sark family. Alex immediately tenses because the girl turns out to be a representative of the Great Seven families. Faye looks at the girl in shock. Alex says that the Dirk Sark family used healing magic. The king turns back to Lana and asks what she meant by duel. The girl says the king should pay attention to Faye's current abilities. The king listens carefully to her. Lana approaches Faye and asks if this will make things better. Faye does not have time to answer and falls into a stupor. Alex smiles and says he does not care. He is ready to prove his abilities again. Faye definitely looks at his father angrily, trying to understand what inevitability he is talking about. King ponders. Faye looks at the man, then looks away as he remembers the duel with Bram. The boy recalled Alex's magic, which was stored in the Aran crystal and which Bram used in the duel, was probably weaker than the real one. He also remembered spirit magic and thought, sooner or later it will become an obstacle for him. This is why the boy firmly agreed to the duel. The king closes his eyes and remains silent, then says, the duel will still take place but only in 15 days. He orders Faye and Alex to prepare well for the duel. Faye and Alex exchange intense glances. Faye returned late in the evening. He stood under the streams of water in the shower. The boy remembered his father's ice. He looked at him with hatred. Faye punched the wall. She sat down on the floor and froze in thought. Alex did not weaken for a step. He was sure Alex's magical power was only contempt. Faye knew this man was ruthless. He wondered if he could defeat him. Then Faye finally finds himself in space and stubbornly decides he will overcome his father and will not spare his father. The next morning, Faye met with classmates. Everyone was scared and kept saying it was a complete nightmare. Faye looked depressed. Hyzen grabbed his head with his hands and said that something terrible keeps happening again and again. Iris screamed that they would have to stay after lessons for practice. Faye asked what the classmates were talking about. He requested, "Let them explain everything." Jisoo began to explain. Yesterday, Aaron entered the classroom. He apologized for being late. All the students noticed that the man looked depressed. They decided to ask him what had happened. The man says that the school decided to hold a competition between their class and Class A. Even before the lesson started, the man was sitting in the office. Neryl came in and immediately noticed that Aaron was full of enthusiasm. Neryl approached Aaron and said, no matter how hard he tries, his students will still be weaker than him. He was sure that his students were many times stronger than ordinary mages. Iron smiles and says that he cannot pretend he did not hear what he said. He reminds the man, Bram from Nerold's class, lost to his student Faye. Nerold begins to get annoyed. Then he decided to suggest to Aaron that their classes participate in a competition. Aaron asked what that meant. Nerold proposes a team competition. He convinces Aaron that this way they can find out whose class is stronger. Nerold asked why the man refuses. He assumed that Aaron is afraid. Nerold said the man can simply get on his knees and then Nerold will forgive. Aaron began to protest. Aizen says that it will be a team battle. He adds, the first fighter will be Faye. Then Iris begins to tell that the class teacher emphasized to her and Jisoo that she and Faye are on good terms, so they need to support each other. The class teacher convinced them that teamwork is very important in this matter and does not accept objections. Iris and Gason fall to their knees and say that this is exactly how it happened. Faye thinks that it is all very boring. Iris said that she has a guess about the participants from Class A. Guessing who exactly will participate was easy. Bram asks what all this means. He mocked the fact that Class A will fight against Class E and asked not to mock him. Aizen says that he heard Class A will be represented by Bram Bonnet, Alice Bonnet, and Stroff Cornell. Iris opens her arms wide and says that Nerold caused problems for Aaron. She adds that Faye has just returned from the royal castle. She thinks the boy is exhausted. Faye thinks for a moment, then says that he is actually not very tired and that this will be a good workout for him. Jisoo raises an eyebrow and asks what that boy is talking about. Iris wonders what happened in the castle. Melia thought about how cute Faye is. Gazen turns to Iris and asks who Struve Carnal is. Iris didn't know either. Faye says they still have to give it their all. After class, all the classmates gather again in the training room. Faye says that first Iris and Jisoo need to learn to work together. The boy and girl ask what that means. Faye replies, the opponent is a spiritual mentor. Therefore, victory is impossible without cooperation. Iris looks intently at Gason and asks if she really has to cooperate with this guy. Gason says the girl shouldn't look at him as if he is trash. Faye reaches out and ties the legs of Jisoo and Iris. The boy and the girl tried to stop him, but he had already tied the last knot. Faye asks what they think about the three-legged race. He believes it should be perfect. Iris and Gason will be able to learn to cooperate. Iris and Gason take a step forward and immediately fall. The girl yells at the boy to back away from her. He responds by shouting that the girl is holding him back. Both of them try to get up from the floor. When Iris and Gason finally got up from the floor, the girl turned to the boy and asked if he could move his legs. Gason asked the girl the same question. Iris and Gason were madly angry at each other. Faye glanced at them sideways and apologized. He felt like he was to blame. The man wanted to suggest another way but noticed something strange while the girl and the boy were arguing. An idea flashed in his mind. A magic ball flew right between Iris and Jisoo. They both turned sharply and noticed Faye, who was holding out his hand. Iris poked Faye with her finger and exclaimed that it was very dangerous. Gason asked what the boy was doing. Faye replied he did nothing. He was interested in whether the classmates could handle the unexpected. He said they had no problems with that. Iris insists that it was extremely dangerous. Jisoo notes if Faye had hit them, he could have seriously injured them. Melia looked at the classmates and wondered why Faye was treating them that way. Faye raises his index finger up. Iris and Jisoo understand. The boy wants them to look up. When Iris and Gaston raise their eyes up, they notice a huge number of fireballs. They immediately raise their hands and create a wall of water. At first, Faye looks at Iris and Gaston with surprise. Then the surprise blooms into a smile and laughter. He says that they both perfectly complement each other. At that moment, Bram and Alice were leaving the school. Bram turned to Alice and told her not to do anything stupid. The girl asked what that meant. Bram replied that he was going to fight Faye and asked if Alice could fight in a pair with Struth. Liz wonders if her brothers are fighting again. Bram says that the girl still hasn't answered him. Alice raises her eyes and says she understands. Bram clicks. The girl lowers her head again. Bram turns around and again demands that she hurry up. He says that lately she has stopped listening to him. Alice raises her hands and clenches them into fists, insisting that it is not true. Bram asks what exactly is the girl's problem with emotions. Alice asks what exactly her brother means. Bram wonders if he himself has any emotional problems, and he believes that it is definitely not because of Faye. Bram tries to figure out why he is overwhelmed by anxiety. He assumes the cause is Alice, hatred, or envy. Eventually, he settles on envy but still cannot understand why exactly he envies. Alice followed her brother. She tried to understand what to do. Her legs did not move. The girl stops and lifts her head. She feels something. Bram turns around and asks why the girl stopped. He orders her to hurry up. Alice leans forward and apologizes. Bram does not understand what is happening to his sister. Alice runs away and shouts at Bram that she has unfinished business. She asked her brother to return first. Bram scolded her. Jace and Anaris were confused. They asked Faye if he was telling the truth. Faye confirmed his words and asked his friends to be careful. He stated that Alice's abilities are many times stronger than Bram's. At that moment, Alice runs out to them and immediately attracts their attention. Faye looks at his sister in complete confusion. Alice tries to say something. Jason and Iris walk away. Faye hears Jason say that they still have business, so they will leave. Faye asks what that means. Iris apologizes and says she will go too. Faye looks at Alice again. Then he turns around and says that he also has to go. Alice stops the boy and asks him to wait. She asks if they can talk a little. Faye refuses. He insists that it is impossible, but already with doubt in his voice, he finally agrees and says they can talk briefly. Alice smiles. Faye does not understand why the girl decided to talk to him. Alice asks if Faye will participate in the contest. Faye answers that yes, he will participate. He asks the girl that cursed question. Alice says that she is participating too. She is interested in why she was chosen. Faye wonders if Alice is just very shy and modest, but he knew the girl's abilities are much higher than Bram's. Alice noticed he addressed her as a classmate, not as a sister. It saddened her, but she was glad that he agreed to talk to her. Faye asks the girl not to worry. He assures her that he will not show his emotions at the competition. Alice turns to Faye and asks if he really intends to win. He replies that this is exactly his desire. Alice says she understands. She asks if he will really fight with her. Faye hesitates and answers that he will have to fight. Alice lowers her head and looks down gloomily, then stands up and declares that she will definitely win. Faye looks at the girl with surprise. He did not expect such a reaction from her. Alice bows and runs away, and the boy blushes and watches her with his eyes. The next day, Iris, Gason, and Faye agreed to meet at an establishment. Faye glanced at the menu and asked what strategy his classmates were choosing for their meeting. Hyzen takes a sip from his glass and again clarifies that the students from Class A are spiritists. He asks if this is true. Hyzen is sure they will never overcome them by force, and he does not want to cooperate with Iris. He says the chances of winning are small. Iris flashes with indignation. Iris smiles and says she did not expect Gatson to be so calm and reasonable. She thought he had no brains left, and now Gatson begins to get angry. While Iris and Gason were arguing, Faye asked them to order something. He turned to the waiter who approached their table. When the waiter brought everything the students ordered, Gason asked Iris and Faye to listen to his plan. Faye was impressed that this guy even had a plan. Iris asked what exactly it was. Hyzen says that rival spirits look like animals, and that they can create interesting things. Iris asks again about the animals. Jason clarifies if his classmates understood him. Iris and Faye think about it. Jason shifts his gaze to his classmates and waits for an answer. Faye raises his hand and apologizes for stopping. Iris says she also thinks so. Iris thinks that this guy has already found a way to use the fact that the animal is not very smart, but she cannot figure out how. Jason smiles and then pretends as if he will say that he still uses it in battle. He says that it is bait, and a drink flows from its face. Iris even widens her eyes. Iris asks what bait means. Jason says that they need to distract the spirits, and while they are savoring the food, they fight the mages directly. Jason is sure spirits are full-fledged animals, so you can't call them particularly smart. He's confident that they will definitely manage. Faye closes his eyes and thinks that there is no hope for them. Iris says that the only one who is not very smart is Jason. Jason asks what all this means. He begins to get increasingly irritated. Faye tells this guy that the spirits are not interested in food, and Jason insists they are animals. Faye explains most spirits get magical power from the food that a mage brings them. That's why they are not interested in food. He says that Jason will not be able to distract a spirit if he simply puts food in front of its eyes. Iris says that Jason constantly sleeps in lessons, so he does not know the basics. Iris says that it would be more effective to use Jason himself as bait, rather than putting a plate of food in front of the spirit. Jason asks why he has to be the bait. Faye considers the girl's words about using Jason as bait. He thinks it is a great idea. Iris and Jason ask what it means. Jason goes crazy again and asks why he has to be the bait. Faye asks the guy to calm down and listen to him. Faye says that he has been observing Iris and Jason for a long time. He claims that Iris's magical power is extraordinarily pure. Faye believes that the difference in their physical abilities is small, but it is in magical power that significant differences are hidden. He is confident that he can use this. Iris smiles and looks at Jason. At that moment, he clenches his hand into a fist and fiercely looks back at the girl. Faye says that Jason's strong point is his impressive power. The man asks what Faye means. Faye says that Jason is best to attack the enemy from the front. Iris will have to go behind. She is agile and nimble. Jason turns to Faye and asks if he is joking. Faye confidently says that this is the best option for them. Jason asks if Iris and Jason want to train. Jason asks how exactly they will train. Faye says that Jason will have to attack from the front. At this time, Faye will take all the spells. Jason asks if this guy is trying to provoke him on purpose. Iris thinks it over and says that then they will be able to attack only one enemy. Jason starts thinking about it and asks if Faye really fights two opponents at once. The man answers yes. Faye believes that he will have to deal with only one person. Iris turns and asks what that means. Faye thinks that his opponent will be Bram, too proud to allow himself otherwise. Faye thinks that Bram will not want to share with Eliza. He is sure Bram will either order Eliza to stay behind or send her to help Struve Carnell. Iris recalls that Faye said the day before yesterday that Alice is stronger than Bram, and Faye says only one thing: Struve Carnell is definitely weaker than Bonet's. Faye is convinced Alice is not only stronger, she is also unpredictable. Therefore, she is the one to fear the most. The man says in this battle Jason will play a very important role. Bait. Jason asks why he has to be the bait. Suddenly someone appears next to the guys and asks what they are doing. It was the one who was worried whether the guys were really discussing strategy. He says it is hard to be an ordinary mage. Heisen turns to that man and asks whom he called an ordinary mage. The man repeats he was talking exactly about them. Iris asks who this man is. The boy starts getting worked up because the girl did not know who he really was. The man looks at Iris and sees her frown. He blushes, feeling his heart start to beat faster. Faye asks if he is really Struve Carnell. The boy looks at Faye and says yes. After that, he looks at the boy and asks if he is really Faye Dirk. Struve says he has heard about Faye. He is sure, for someone with such power, it is foolish to remain among ordinary mages any longer. He says that Faye will not appear as long as Iris and Jason restrain him. Heisen and Iris begin to get nervous. Heisen asks if that man is really trying to provoke them into a fight, and Iris asks what exactly he is saying. Struve closes his eyes and asks the boys to calm down. He says they do not need to be angry just because he told the truth. He asks if Iris and Jason understand this. Jason and Iris think that if they had a little more power, even Faye would not be able to stop them. Strut teases the boys, don't be sad. He says that they will inevitably lose to him anyway. Struth approaches Iris and asks what she is thinking, calling her his kin. He is interested in why they do not follow his orders to avoid unnecessary trouble. Strau puts his hand on Iris's shoulder and the girl immediately starts grumbling. At the same moment, Jason points at her and asks if Strau really called her kitten. He thinks she looks more like a gorilla. Strut is shocked at how the boy can despise the girl like that. He says he will make sure the boy never says such things again. Gazin asks the boy not to make him laugh. The boy replies that the boy does not even know what Iris is made of. Iris asks what all this means. Stroff throws the last ray of leaves and wishes the boys good luck. Then he says it's all in vain anyway. Faye suddenly stops Stroff. The man turns around. Faye says that he is wrong. He tries to convince him that he will lose to Iris and Gayson. Stroff asks what that means. He asks the boy if he even understands what he is saying. Faye insists that it is true. Eisen and Iris glare angrily at Stroff. He sharply turns around and says he will wait for it. See you, he adds and leaves. Gayson curses and says that Stroff really annoys him. Iris says that he did not seem so bad to her as she had heard. Gayson is outraged and replies, the girl will not be the bait. Faye smiles and confidently says that everything is fine. He convinces his classmates they will definitely win. He asks them to believe in it. Iris and Gayson look at that man and do not know what to say. At that moment, Melia enters the establishment. She greets the boys and apologizes for the wait. Gayson turns to the girl and asks if she really has finished her business. The girl replies that she has finished all her business. Faye says they have 9 days left, so they need to train hard to have no regrets. Stroff lies on a bench in the park and remembers Iris. He blushed, remembering how she looked at him. That boy started swearing and shouting that it was all because of her. 9 days after the start of classes, all the students gathered in the arena where the clashes between Class A and Class E were to take place. All the students gathered together again. Someone among them says they heard there was a scandal among the teachers, and one of the students wonders if it is not obvious that Class E has no chance of winning. One of the female students asks if her classmates heard that Faye is in class. Nerold announces that all students and teachers have gathered. Into the microphone, he says that Class A will fight against Class E. He suggests everyone enjoy the fight and place bets on the winners. Aaron approaches his students and says that Nerold is too self-satisfied. The students immediately greet the class teacher. Aaron returns to his students and says that he believes in them. He is sure they will definitely win. Iris, Faye, and Gayson are surprised by the teacher's reaction. The face smiles and says that it all started when Aaron got angry. Everyone was laughing at his class. He insists that they will definitely win. The students in the stands attract Aaron's attention. One of the boys points a finger, as if to say the teacher is all sweaty from nerves. They all look at him in confusion, deciding that he has already given up. Aaron continues to shout and orders his students to give their all. He believes in them, and Jisoo shouts back that they will do everything they can to win. Nerold is about to explain the rules. He says that they are not allowed to use the Aaron crystal. Nerold says that if students get injured during the battle, it will be their responsibility. The man adds, if they can disable their opponents, they will win. Faye says that he is fighting Bram and Alyssa. He says that Jisoo and Iris will have to deal with Struff. Jisoo says that the boy can count on them. Nerdle becomes more serious, and after the countdown loudly announces that the fight can begin. Faye enchants his body and rushes forward. Struff looks impressed at the speed of this boy. Faye creates a clay shield right behind him. Struff stops abruptly because of the obstacle. Bram smiles and says that his brother still came. He insists that there is no way back. Faye tells Bram that he will be his opponent just as the boy wanted. Strau turns his head and realizes his opponents are Iris and Jisoo. Gayson and Iris rush at the boy. Struff says they are too weak. He is sure no matter how many there are, nothing will change. Eisen says that the boy probably does not expect it to be easy. Iris says it's time to teach the boy a lesson. Stroff began making a deal with the noble spirit. Iris shouted that she would not allow him to do that. The girl launched several fireballs at him. Straug asked his spirit to absorb his power. He smiled. Suddenly someone created water balls to protect Straug. Iris and Gayson turned around, seeing how Alice used magic to help Struff. Faye was surprised. Some girl had taken to helping Struff. Stroff continued to hold on to his spirit. When he finished, he raised his hand and decided to summon lightning with the spell Lightning Rod. Faye launched a fireball at his sister. Alice turned and stopped it with her water ball. Faye carefully watched his sister. He saw that she was really very strong. Alice was able to deflect 6 fireballs from Faye with 12 water balls. She can instantly determine if her magic is weaker than the opponent's magic and then reflect back with one twice as strong. Faye knew. She felt that someone with foreign intentions was dangerous. She would agree with him to protect herself. Bram shouts at Alice and demands that she get out of the way. He tells her that she needs to go to Struff. The girl is stunned. Faye launches a magical charge toward the girl. Alice stops and shifts her gaze to the boy. Faye had to deal with Bram and stop Alice. He could not allow her to go down this path. Eisen asks Iris if she is ready. He says she must not let him down. Iris replies, it all depends on that guy. Stroff asks what happened. He has no idea whether Iris and Jisun will gather to attack him, and he blushes because he thinks, when Iris is angry, she looks way too cute. Iris shouts at the boy not to even dare to hope. At that very moment, Stroff orders his spirit to use Thunder Needle. Jason charges into the attack and shouts that he will show this guy who is really weak. A huge mass of electric charges flies straight at him and Jason just smirks crookedly. They asked if Iris and Heesun know where the psychic spiritualist's weak spot is. Heisen asks if the very absence of weak points in them allowed them to dominate ordinary mages. Faye says he is right. He recalls what many say about spiritualists, that they apparently have no obvious weaknesses. Faye then refutes these rumors. He says that the weakness of spirits is that their spirit uses magic. Heisen spreads his arms to the sides and asks if this is the advantage of spirit mages. He claims that spirit magic is stronger than the magic of ordinary wizards. Heisen believes that because of this, they are at a disadvantage. Cannot use it. Faye says that it is because the spirit magic is too strong. He insists there is one gap that spirit mages cannot fill. Faye says that by using wind magic, they cannot cast any other spell provided they do not use any special tools. Faye explains, although the spirit mage uses spirit magic, he himself is vulnerable. The more confident the spirit mage, the more he loses vigilance. Heisen uses fire magic and a wall of flames appears right before him. The firewall spell is intermediate magic. It was too early for Heisen to use it. He did not yet know how to use it. Staff did not think that Jisun could defend himself with a wall of fire. Jisun understood, without Staff he would not stop this guy, he only needed time, even if just for a moment. Heisen was going to squeeze out as much time as he could. He just needed to direct the spirit magic onto himself. At that moment, Iris jumped out from behind Jisun and launched several fireballs at Strouch. Braum shot a fire arrow at his brother Faye. Faye deflected all of Braum's magical attacks. Faye thought if Braum just keeps hitting him with spells, there will definitely be enough time. Faye considered this an easy victory. Suddenly, a water spear struck him. The man sharply turned around and covered himself with a clay shield. Braum barked at Alice to stop interfering in their fight. The girl apologized to her brother. Faye looked carefully at the girl, who did not know what to do. He thought she had seriously miscalculated by deciding to interfere in Braum's affairs. Faye shifted his gaze to Iris and Jisun. He immediately understood. Everything was going according to plan. Under these conditions, he could not afford to lose. Faye cast the elemental control spell. Braum began scolding him because he had used deception magic again. Braum threw a fire spear at Faye. Faye understood. Braum had already encountered deceptive magic, so now it would not scare him. Faye also responded. She threw several fire spears at once, which greatly surprised Braum, so Braum fell out of the fight. Faye decided that now she needed to deal with Alice and buy some time. Suddenly, Alice's voice was heard. She opened a water shell and shielded Braum from the fire spears. Faye looked at the girl in complete amazement. He did not think she would risk starting a fight. Braum turns to Alice. The girl cuts him off, apologizes. Braum does not understand what is happening. At that moment, Alice looks at Faye and says she wants to fight him. Faye remembers in childhood she was always close to Alice. He showed her various magical tricks. The girl was delighted and dreamed of becoming like her brother. And the contract with the spirit was never signed, so Faye had to run away from home. That day, Alice stood by the window and wondered how such a thing could have happened at all. The girl remembers how Alex called them all to his office and said it was all over. He demanded that they stop calling Faye brother and asked the girl not to make him repeat it again and again. Alice was very shocked by this turn of events. She thought, if only that day she could have stopped her parents, maybe Faye would still be part of their family. But she understood she did not have such power. Because of this, the girl was terribly worried. She wanted to become stronger so as not to feel helpless anymore. From that day, Alice began to study even harder. Thanks to this, she was able to meet her brother again. She was extremely happy. Until that day, Alice had never disobeyed Braum's orders, but at least once she decided to show her character. Alice wanted to test her strength after so many years of persistent training. She wanted Faye to see her power. Braum turned to the girl and asked her not to laugh at him. Faye threw a stone at Braum and ordered him to shut up. Braum fell to the ground unconscious. Faye turns to the girl and says that this is a very unexpected turn for him. He did not think that Alice would also want to fight for real. Faye looked at the girl. He assumed that her spirit was of an intermediate level. It was difficult for him to determine exactly. Faye also notes the girl's defense was impressive. There was nothing superfluous in her magical power. Alice understood that she was behaving rudely and that she should apologize, but she wanted to fight Faye. Faye did not understand why the girl was acting that way. Then he tried to calm his own thoughts and reminded himself the girl hates him. He noticed that the girl looked happy when Faye was kicked out of the house. Faye frowned and Alice looked at him and smiled. At that moment, the boy thought that he had something to fight for. He was already ready. All that was left was to fight. Iris released several fireballs at Struve and a colossal explosive wave occurred, visible from all the stands. Nerold reports that Class E is advancing on Class A. He says that Class A did excellently. Iris looks at the place where the boy was and wonders if she succeeded. Smoke disperses and Struve appears, saying that he was suffering from pain. Iris looks at the boy and does not understand why it did not work. The boy moves toward the girl and asks if she really thinks that this attack will cause him any harm. Struve turns his head to Jason and says that he is not capable of fighting at all. He calls him weak. He convinces the girl that Jason could not even land a single blow. Iris gets angry and says that this is not true. Struve remembered the moment when Jason rushed at him and tried to attack. Then he looked at the girl and saw that she was already crying, so he asked Faye to come to help. Struve asks what is wrong with the girl's face, asks her to stop, then smiles and says that he is very excited. Struve approaches Iris and asks if she will go on a date with him. At that moment, the girl slaps herself for her thoughts. She thought Struve fought the two of them alone, although she is quite strong. The girl began casting a spell. She asked Itzen to give her an opponent. Heisen gets up from the floor and approaches Struve. He tells the boy not to even think that he has already won. Iris looked at him and froze, stunned. Heisen says that the girl does not look like herself. She is trembling and afraid. He asks where the strong and proud girl has gone. Iris asks what all this means. Struve looks at the boy in surprise. He says that the boy is trying harder than Struve expected. Jason points at the boy and says that they, ordinary mages, learn differently than those like Struve. Struve smiles indulgently and apologizes proudly. Then Struve calls his spirit again and says that he feels the boy underestimates the spirit master. Heisen looks at the boy, not understanding. Iris shouts at Heisen to use magic faster. Heisen says he knows what he needs to do. Faye says even if Struve lowers his guard, one must not forget that he has a spirit, so Struve will not be so easy to defeat. Faye wants his classmates to do this, even if Struve manages to set up a defense. He says that this is exactly what they have been training so hard for the last 9 days. Struve uses lightning and tells Jason to be calmer, or else he will regret it. Iris and Jason raise a wall of fire that combines the energy of two people using the same magic in one place, and at the same time, they become stronger. The magic of Iris and Jason suppresses the magic of Struve. The boy does not understand what is happening. He does not know if this is really all his potential. He was amazed that ordinary mages were able to repel his attack. Faye said that spirit users rely too much on their magic. Even if it is countered, most of them will still use spirit magic simply because they have no other choice. Iris and Jason continued to twist magic. Iris says that Faye was right. Struve really is not trying at all. Jason grumbles that he is bored. Struve realizes that his magic was repelled. He does not understand how Iris and Jason managed to do that if it was Struve himself who was chosen to represent their class in the battle against Class E. He had already decided he would win anyway. He was going to use a simple spell, and he had thought so from the very beginning. Now he stood in the arena and did not understand how this could have happened. He was amazed by the results when two mages combined their magic. Iris noticed Struve's magic was beginning to weaken. Right now, the girl remembers the fairy who said that spirit magic consumes much more energy than ordinary magic. Before the battle, Faye convinced his classmates, if they just stand firm, they will defeat Struve. Iris shouts that they will stand unshakably until the very end. Jason shouts that they will do as Faye said. At this moment, Struve looks tensely at the boys and realizes his chances of winning are melting away. He is desperate. It doesn't even occur to him what he can do. The spirit of Struve begins to fade. Jason asks if the spirit of Struve is really leaving. Iris says that the spirit has finally used up all its energy. Struve rages. Gaizan suddenly runs up to Struve, waves his fist, and asks if he is already tired of fighting them with magic. Gaizan smiles crookedly and asks if he really thinks that Gaizan can defeat him in a fair duel without magic. Struve says that Jason is very arrogant. After that, Jason punches him right in the face. Jason continues to beat Strut. He cannot dodge or cover himself. Jason beats until Strut faints. Heisen picks him up and reminds him that they train differently. After that, he collapses to the ground from exhaustion. Iris smiles and laughs at the fact that the mages finally got involved in a completely ordinary fight. She asks the boy how he came up with that. Jisun grimaces indulgently. Iris also falls next to Jisun. He smiles and says that all this had to be done because Faye asked them. Alice presses her palm to her chest and says she wants to fight Faye. She stands right in front of her brother and Faye looks intently at the girl. At this very moment, Alice remembers how once a boy showed her various magic tricks. At that moment, Faye remembered his sister and thought that she hated him. The boy continued to stare at the girl and she smiled at Faye. Then Faye suddenly lunged forward and was almost attacking his sister. He had no intention of sparing Alice. Faye enchanted his body and Alice again resorted to water magic. The girl raised a wall of water before her and the boy struck it with his hand. Then Faye pulled his hand back and used thunder magic. He cast a thunderbolt. Elise crossed her arms and started swearing. The girl started throwing water balloons at the boy again, and Faye threw several spears of flame at the girl. Then the boy began to dodge the girl's attacks. At that moment he thought she was casting various spells at him quickly and smoothly, without pauses. Alice was tired and landed on the floor. Faye stood right in front of her. The girl smiled because Faye was really very strong. Alice got up and called for a downpour of water. She shouted that she would not give up. Faye looked at the drops and compared their power to the power of bullets. Faye extended his hand forward and threw a stone ball in response. Alice was amazed. The stone ball instantly shattered into pieces and with incredible precision deflected the splashes of water. Alice knew that breaking a stone ball was an incredibly difficult task for a normal person, so she was stunned how Faye managed to land a perfectly accurate strike, diverting Alice's attack. She still thought that this guy was incredible. Faye decided that the fastest way to victory was to use the highest level of fire magic, Flame Wave, but he realized this magic requires too much energy, and he understood that during the fight with Alice he must not exhaust himself. Alice needed a rematch. She believed she had to win. Faye understood what the girl was striving for. Alice began releasing water arrows. At that moment Faye thought that the girl had managed to reach an incredible level of mastery in magical power. Faye dodges and curses. He realized that it was difficult to get close to the girl. Alice does not stop. She continues to attack the guy. Faye knew controlling the elements takes too much magical energy. Faye also knew that fighting Alice in this way was too risky since her magic was still being perfected. Faye decided he would attack Alice from afar. Other students froze and watched the clash between Alice and Faye, not believing that this was really a fight between first-year students. Alice felt that even Faye could not easily break through the water shell, but he still effortlessly intercepted the attack with magic. No matter what Alice did, she had no confidence that she would win. She thought about how to defeat Faye. Faye thought about how Alice blocks elemental and intermediate magic at this stage. It was getting harder for him to drag the game on endurance. Faye raises a wave of fire and thinks it's enough to boast, immediately showing all his abilities. The boy launches a fire attack at the girl. Alice sets up a water dome to deflect the blow. The fire players increasingly damage the water dome. Faye looked at the girl and thought that she couldn't relax just because she managed to repel the first attack. Faye used a military trick. He was going to use fire magic incompatible with water. This was the magic he did not intend to break through the defense. Alice notices that Faye is preparing to use another spell. Faye actually intended to break the defense with high-level earth magic with water properties. Faye sent a wave of earth at the girl. Alice's water dome began to sway from side to side. Faye realized that the water shell was aimed at increasing the mage's overall defense, so now the boy could break Alice's defense. The girl realized she was caught. She decided the fairy really has extraordinary power. She wondered why the boy could not make a contract with a spirit, and then she was thrown to the ground. All the spectators were stunned by the result of the fight. They could not believe that Faye won. Neril declared that Class E had won. Faye looked at Alice, then he raised his hand and thought that he had hit too hard. He did not expect the attack to be so powerful. Everyone began approaching Alice, Jisun, and Faye, calling them incredible. They absolutely loved the battle and congratulated the students on their victory. Many people talked about how Faye used magic. They noticed it was completely different from the magic of others. After this battle, the attitude towards May changed sharply. She was no longer despised. It was the 15th day after Faye's first visit to the royal castle in 6 years. Today he was heading there again. As King Armando had promised, the ceremonial preparations for the duel were already in full swing. Faye stubbornly stuck to his own. He finally gave a decisive fight to his father, Alex. The royal castle was receiving guests. All aristocrats were heading to the hall where the decisive battle was to unfold. Lana sat in the hall and said that the day had finally come when Faye had to fight his father. She was tormented by the question, was her son okay? The king asked what this girl was talking about. He reminded him that she was the one who started this whole story. Lana asked why so many people had gathered. The king replied that the other nobles also wanted to watch the duel. The king says that a lot of attention is focused on the upcoming duel. Lana said that Faye is truly a celebrity. Many aristocrats wondered who Lana was. They did not understand why the girl was so friendly with Her Majesty. Bram suffers from bullying because he has to watch the fight on the monitor. His mother says, no matter how strong he is, if his father's magic weakens, there will be great trouble. Lana smiles. She wants Faye to do what he has always desired. She believed in her son. Alex entered the arena. Faye stood opposite him. Drones circled around and filmed everything with a camera. Alex angrily glanced at Faye. Faye closely watched the man. He thought that Alex was the man he once called father. Alex looked at the boy and wondered why a mage needed magic and spirit magic. He assumed that magic was needed to fight demons and also to protect what is dear to a person. Alex thought differently. He believed that magic was needed only for a moment, the very one that lasts now. Alex would regret it if the boy was accidentally defeated because he tried so hard to survive. One of the drones landed near Faye and Alex and announced that 10 seconds remained until the start of the battle. The drone began a countdown. At that moment, Faye took a fighting stance. Alex formed a barely noticeable smile, thinking that the boy was terribly nervous. In a one-on-one duel between two mages, there are initially two main options. The first are basic magical spells. They are weak but faster to cast. They disrupt the enemy's rhythm. The second option is to use non-systemic magic, enchant the body. If you deliberately force the enemy to cast a spell, it can be blocked and then a more powerful one can be used. But if the opponent is a strong mage, then in the first case the person loses. In the second case, the stakes become so high that there is no turning back. Faye looked at his father and thought that the fight had not yet begun, but the magic concentrated in Alex's body and his confident posture were truly exceptional. The entire Bonnet family watched as the fight began. Alice wished her brother good luck. Bram sneered defiantly and thought that no matter what his brother did, he would never defeat their father. Boy believed that Faye himself was to blame for everything. Faye decided that he needed to hit Alex with magic he didn't even know about, but the most important thing for him was to gain an advantage. The man smiled. Faye smiled, thinking that everything was going as best as possible. He believed Alex, the one who tried to ruin his life, was an ordinary aristocrat who could not find a worthy opponent. He was no longer going to tolerate it. Faye calculated which strategy to use. At first, he thought to throw a fireball, but to do this, he needed to keep his distance and cast spells on his body. Faye's opponent was the strongest mage scientist, so he needed to bring his powers to the maximum. The countdown was still ongoing. Faye heard the drone announce the fight had begun and immediately started throwing fireballs at his father. Alex calmly stopped them with water balls. So Faye sat next to his father. This surprised him wildly. Faye reached out to him and tried to throw a fireball at him. An explosion sounded. The spectators saw it was ordinary elemental magic but performed too quickly. They decided that the trembling mage's hands were of a very high level. Faye looked where his father had been and realized he had disappeared. Suddenly, Alex appeared right behind Faye and said that he was right behind him. Alex raised his hand and threw a stone ball at that boy. Faye had no time to dodge or parry and he fell on his back. Faye got up from the floor. Alex approached closer, said that he had wonderfully enchanted his body without any spell, so he deservedly praised him. Then the man asked why he thought the boy couldn't do the same. Faye started laughing in response. Alex asked why that man was laughing. Faye said that her opponent was a lord from the 7 powerful families. Alex asked if he really thought that Faye was so naive. Alex again asks that guy what is funny there. Faye looks at the man and says that he believes in him. Alex looks at his son in confusion. He asks what it means. Faye says he thinks that man is stronger than him. But Alex notices a very familiar technique. Faye creates a tornado. Man asks if he has already seen something similar. Man notices a fiery tornado appearing near Faye. Faye says that the bandits used the same magic when they tried to get rid of him. Alex notices that Faye has so much magic that it takes his breath away. He is amazed by the speed of the tornado and he understands why Bram lost. The fairy raises her hand and sends a fiery whirlwind at Alex right up close, directly in front of her. Faye waited a long time for the moment when he could finally fight his father. He believed he lived precisely for this. Faye convinces himself that he really did everything to fight his father and defeat him. Faye sends a fiery whirlwind towards Alex. The man did not move, only smiled boldly, thinking that he had no idea how everything would turn out. Alex remembers how the bandits came to his office and said that they had dealt with his son. Alex concentrates magic in his hands and shouts at the fairy that she should have simply not existed. Man calls his spirit. Faye understands it was the Fire Panther #1. Just the sight of the spirit hand, Faye's magic immediately scattered like gunpowder. Faye thinks that it can't be so simple. He throws water spears toward the father. Alex asks if the boy is really showing his true power. Fog forms, all the spectators start cursing. They cannot see what exactly is happening in the arena. Alex says he is sorry. He smiles and insists. The boy managed to survive that time, but this time the father is not going to let him go alive. Alex says that Faye is weak. He is sure he did the right thing by ordering his mercenaries to deal with him. Faye curses. The man attacks his son again and says that this terrible mage is just words that mean nothing. Faye replies that maybe so, but immediately stops, fears that he probably won't be able to win. Faye pushes him back. Agin rises and breathes heavily. The boy looked at his father and thought, hatred only grows. Alex wonders if this is really all the boy is capable of. He says it is a waste of time. Faye wondered what he had been training so long and hard for. She thought it was too early to give up. Faye understood there is a chasm between what a person is born with and what they learn. Faye knew that mere desires are not enough and resolute intentions alone will never suffice to bridge this gap. Suddenly Faye hears a voice asking if the boy is really giving up. The boy gets scared. He doesn't understand where this voice came from. This boy again hears the same voice and the same question. Lana notices that he is stunned. She begins to worry about him very much. The voice asks if the boy should surrender before showing his true power. He asks if the boy agrees. Faye asks what exactly true power he needs to show. Faye remembers 5 imperial beasts. He frowns and decides he will not use their power. The voice asks why the boy refuses to use the power of the 5 imperial beasts. Faye replies that he will not use their power, has already harmed one of his dearest before. Faye uses water web, and Alex releases his spirit power and asks if such magic can withstand the magic of the highest level spirit. Alex says he uses only a fraction of what he is capable of. He tells Faye that he will send him to the afterlife with the strongest spirit magic. The man pulls out a fire ring. Faye understands. If he does not use the power of the 5 imperial beasts, he will definitely lose. Faye again hears a voice telling him that the highest level of spirit can only be defeated in one way. Faye closes her eyes and remembers all those days of training. The voice commands the boy to recall why the 5 imperial beasts chose him. The voice asks if the boy is really ready to end everything like that. He says that the boy can use the spirits with whom he made a contract. Faye hears the voices of 5 imperial beasts claiming they are part of his true power. Faye closes his eyes and agrees. Alex looks at the ring of fire where Faye was. He smiles crookedly and says that the boy is a true master. The fire died down and Faye appeared right in the center of the arena. He looked at his father firmly with determination in his heart. If the father calmly used spirit magic against an ordinary mage, then the boy had no other choice. Faye stands up and forms a seal with his hands. He says that he is the one who sealed the 5 imperial beasts. He is the one who shackled them with chains. Then the boy raises his hands in the seal and declares that he is the one who made a contract with the 5 imperial beasts. He asks them to allow him to use their power. Faye demands that the 5 imperial beasts be released and allowed to manifest, but he still decided to use them because they were part of his power. Faye extends his hand and everything around freezes. An icy wall with spikes grows around him. Alex and the spectators freeze in amazement. Alex rages when he realizes that Faye used high-level magic. He is shocked. Then the man saw the boy in the icy wall. Faye cracked the icy wall and climbed out. Alex asked him what he had just done. Alex did not hesitate and launched a fire arrow at the boy. Then the man looked back as soon as he noticed that his spirit had disappeared. He began to curse. Alex turned and looked at Faye, asking why he was smiling. The man shouts that he will not spare his son and lashes him again with fiery spears. The Faye freezes all the spears flying at him. Faye looks at his father and says that all this is in vain. He is sure the whole world obeys only his will, and he declares that everything will freeze. Alex does not understand how Faye managed to freeze his fiery spears. Suddenly his leg is instantly covered with ice and the man screams. Faye says that people cannot thaw his leg. Alex looks at his leg and notices that the ice is starting to spread all over his body. He swears. The man curses and thinks confusedly about what is happening. His body is completely covered in ice. Faye watches carefully as he is covered with ice. Alex shouted and cursed at that boy. He tried to attack him with fiery spears, but nothing worked. Then the man raised his head and looked anxiously at Faye, who continued to smile at him. Alex was sure it is impossible to surpass the magic of the highest level of spirit. He remembered something similar was only possible with the Aron crystal, and finally came to the conclusion no magic can overcome the magic of the spirit. Alex could not come to terms with the fact that he was defeated by an ordinary mage, but what gnawed at him the most was the thought that it happened because of the defeat by Faye. He was thrown into curses out of despair. The man was instantly covered by ice, hadn't even managed to say a word. Everyone was in complete shock at the outcome of the battle. Spectators wondered what had happened. They decided that Alex had left everything. Nothing was visible through the thick fog. Bram could not believe that his father lost. His mother was very angry. Then Cecilia pointed out that the fog was clearing, and Alice, who was sitting nearby, was very worried about her brother Faye. The king showed Lana the ice wall and asked if she knew what it was. Lana replied that she herself did not understand what exactly had happened. Lana turns to the king and asks what he is talking about. The king replies that he wants to find out how Faye managed to win. The girl asks what he is talking about. She reminds him that she was with him from the beginning to the end of the fight. She persuades him nothing was visible through the fog. King asks if the girl really does not know why the arena around her is covered with ice. King suspects something. The boy used high-level magic with astonishing ease. Lana says she knows nothing and does not want to talk about it. The king insists that he must find out anyway. The girl says goodbye to the king and leaves. The king calls her stingy. The servant approaches the king with a book in his hands. The king asks what is going on. He notices that the servant was in incredible haste. The servant shows the king a book titled The Legend of the Five Imperial Beasts. Faye lay down on the bed inside. Finally, everything was over, and thanked the five imperial beasts for their help. Alex kicks the table with all his might and rages. Bran asks his father how he could lose. The man replies with something he himself does not understand. His wife asks what they will do next. Alex says he can do nothing. He insists there must be punishment. Alex swore he was wild because during the meeting with the king, Lana Dirkserk came into the hall and helped him. Armin enters the room. Alex immediately looks at him. Armin smiles and says he understands everything. The man insists he will carry out the order. Everyone gathered in the hall and bowed before the king. The king was about to announce the punishment for the Bonnet family. Alfred Armando orders the confiscation of part of the estates and property of the Bonnet family, the territories of the eastern part. The king announces that the Bonnet family will be under the kingdom's supervision for 6 months. He states that everything said above must be carried out unconditionally. Alex Bonnet accepted his punishment. His wife looked anxiously at the king. Bram was no less worried than his mother, and Alice and Cecilia looked sad. The king asked Alex to sign if he had no objections. A servant approached Alex with a sheet of paper for him to put his signature. The king turns his gaze to Faye. He says that the boy will henceforth be officially called Faradirk. Faye also receives the title of Baron. The boy was deeply surprised. The king says that the lands confiscated from the Bonnets he transfers to Faye as his property. The entire Bonnet family was shaken by this announcement. Alex looked at Faye and glared at him angrily. The king says that later all the details will be recorded in detail. He says that the hats may leave the castle. The king also adds, later they will have to come again to settle all formalities and sign documents. The king asks the fairy to stay for a short while. The boy stands up and says he will stay for a short time. The Bonnet family leaves the hall. When the door closes, the king turns to Faye and says he has a request for him. The king points to his daughter and asks if he can perform magic with lettuce leaves. Faye blushes and asks again what that means. King folds his hands and says that La Tessé needs to be taught magic. At this time, the girl begins to get indignant. Faye asks why he should teach magic with lettuce if there are already court magicians in the kingdom. The king told Letitia the same. He looked at his daughter and noticed that she puffed out her cheeks and blushed. The king said that Letitia told about the fairy's promise. The boy asked what exactly the promise was. Lettuce can no longer stand it and shouts about the promise that Faye gave 6 years ago. The last time he came to the castle, she shouted about what that boy promised her. Faye finally remembers the promise he gave the girl when he passed through the royal garden 6 years ago. King asks if Faye agrees to teach the girl magic. The boy says that he will teach lettuce magic. Faye thinks about the promise. He reasons that the court magicians can teach lettuce much better than he can. Faye looks at the girl and sees she has turned away. Then Lattice got up from her seat and went downstairs, pulling Faye along. Faye immediately understood. Lattice was waiting for the fulfillment of the promise he made 6 years ago. The young man thought that the girl had a strong character because she remembered that promise even when his death was announced. Lettuce leads the boy into the room and asks him to come inside. Faye noticed that this was the princess's room and apologized for intruding. In the room, they are greeted by a maid. She welcomes Faye and Lettuce. The boy widens his eyes in surprise and blushes. The maid says that she is pleased to meet Faye. She learns her name is Selena. Faye also introduces himself. At this time, Lettuce asks the boy to sit down. Faye sits on a chair and tries to say something, but Lattice interrupts him and asks if he really forgot about the promise. She asks if she is right. Faye looks away and says that he forgot. At first, Lettuce is outraged because this guy forgot the promise he made to the girl, and then he suddenly smiles and says that he will be forced to show her King's Landing. The guy asks the girl if she really intends to go for a walk with him. The girl winks and says it will be just the two of them. Faye is embarrassed that there will be only two of them. Lettuce shouts this will be another commitment. Faye asks what that means. Lettuce says that man promised. Faye broke the promise, so he owes her. Faye agrees. Let's laugh. He says he will start practicing magic with the girl then, and the promise will not be considered broken. Lettuce looks darkly at Faye and calls her spirit. She asks if the guy agrees. Faye nods, and the girl raises her hands and shouts that she can't wait for the walk with them. Faye says she knows too little about King's Landing to give a tour. Lettuce replies, it doesn't matter, the main thing is that Faye is there. Faye thinks it's dangerous when two people walk without accompaniment. Lettuce begins to be outraged. She says the guy has already agreed. He says that if something happens, Faye will save her. Faye wants to say something else but suddenly stops and agrees with the girl. She calms down and sits on the sofa. Lettuce says the guy just needs to accept her offer. Lettuce splashes water and says she is waiting for their walk around King's Landing. Faye laughs. Faye leaves the room. At that moment, Lettuce's maid asks if the girl is really going on a date. She says that Lettuce is very cute when she blushes. Lettuce shyly blushes and shouts at the maid to stop saying that. She asks the woman to help her pick out clothes for the walk. The servant girl asks if clothes are needed. She says that the man is much more interesting when the girl is naked. Laches shouts at Selena. Morning came to the kingdom. Trent reached the fairy's door and ordered him to hurry. He asked if the boy was already ready to go for a walk. The man addressed the boy again, but in response silence, so he entered the room. He apologized and saw what the fairy was trying to do with Anna. The fairy turns and looks at Trent. He says the man did not have to apologize. Anna commanded the boy not to move. She was going to make a prince out of him. Trent looked confusedly at Anna and the fairy, then laughed. He said the fairy would go change into formal clothes. The fairy, having changed, leaves the room and sees Laches. He tries to apologize, but the girl interrupts him and says she has been waiting for him for a long time. She asks what he was doing. Faye still manages to apologize. Lettuce blushes and turns her head aside, looking intently at the boy. Lettuce asked why this boy was looking at her so strangely. Faye stepped forward, stretched out his hands, and said the girl was very pretty. Lettuce was embarrassed. The servant pointed to her watch and said they needed to hurry. Lettuce also looked at her watch and realized they were already late. Suddenly, they grabbed the boy's hand and pulled him along. The boy tried to stop the girl, but in vain. Faye asked what happened. He wanted to know why the girl was in such a hurry. Letta replied that she did not want to waste time. She said she wanted to have as much fun as possible with the boy. The girl was happy to be going on a date. Faye blushed. Suddenly they stopped. The boy asked what the girl was doing. Lettuce was pulling on her hat and explaining that they needed to hide from the guards. Faye did not understand why they were doing this. They asked if the princess had permission. Lettuce said that permission was granted, but some restrictions remained. Faye asks what will happen if they get caught. He says that in any case they will be reprimanded. Lettuce asks the boy not to worry. She says she told everyone she works with Selena. Faye says there's nothing to be done. He raises a finger and casts magic. He decided to use the search circle. Super system magic, search circle. It disperses just a little power and uses this imprint to determine exactly where people are in the spell zone. Faye found out that there are 8 people ahead, 5 on the right and left, and only 3 behind. Faye picks up the girl and apologizes. He casts a spell on his own body. He realizes they need to run while there are few guards. The girl only asks what he is going to do. Faye quickly takes off. Faye used the Dark Spirit Doll spell, synthetic advanced magic, created in a painful attempt to escape pursuers when Faye was expelled from the Bonnet family. The guards noticed something and rushed forward, trying to detain the violators. At that time, Faye and Lettuce were right behind them. He was asked if the castle had always been so easily guarded, so he, together with Lettuce, headed to the castle exit. When Lettuce and Faye reach the city, the boy asks the girl what her plans are. Lettuce reminds him that they have a date. The girl asks him not to speak in too formal a tone. He feels that this boy blames her for having royal blood. Suddenly, the girl catches an idea and asks the boy to call her only by her name. Faye asks how he can call the girl like that. Faye asks the girl if he can call her by her name Letty. Girl notes that Faye just dropped the S and says she doesn't care. When the girl senses some smell, she asks what it resembles. Faye asks if the girl wants to eat something. We turn around and say that she is not very hungry. Faye asks why the girl is trying to hide that she is not hungry. Faye and Lettuce were walking the streets of the royal capital. The boy noticed that the girl starts to drool as soon as she sees food. Faye says that he is terribly hungry. He turns to the girl and asks if she wants to have a snack with him. At first, the girl was confused, then she smiled. She blushed and said she would agree only because Faye insisted. Faye did not understand why the girl was acting so strangely. Faye and Lettuce approach a food stall. They are immediately greeted by the seller. They place their order and he immediately starts preparing it. Faye and Lettuce had a snack together. The girl looked satisfied. She really loved this food. Let's go after Faye and ask him what they will do next. The boy thought for a moment, then used the circle surge spell just in case. He decided to check if there were any enemies nearby. Faye noticed 5 people suddenly disappeared. Faye realized they were being watched. Faye realized that the pursuers were keeping a certain distance. He had no idea what their goal was. Note, Faye was already tense. He smiled and said that nothing was wrong. Faye points to a crowd of people and says that something interesting seems to be happening there. He invites the girl to take a look. Lettuce agrees. The girl was delighted with the walk. Faye looked at her carefully and felt that she was really having an incredible time. He did not want to distract her unnecessarily. Faye returns to the girl and asks if she can wait a little. He says he saw something and had to step away and look. Lettuce asks why this boy suddenly disappears. Faye does not answer his own questions. The girl says that then she will go with him. The boy refuses, stating that it is better if the girl waits for him. Let's agree. When Faye went to check the pursuers, Lettuce moved closer to watch him and did not understand what had happened. Faye decided to use a circular search to make sure Lettuce is safe. It was necessary to remove the suspicious people. Faye heard by spell that the pursuers were moving farther and farther away from him. He did not understand why they were retreating, but Faye knew he could not let them escape. Faye enchanted his body again and sharply accelerated. Finally, he was able to catch up with his pursuers. The boy turned to the people in hoods and asked why they were chasing him in Lettuce. Suddenly, all the pursuers jumped on the wall and tried to escape, but Faye stopped them with magic. He turned the walls into earthen ones. Then the boy tied the pursuers with earthen ropes, and one of them said that he expected nothing else from them. The boy noticed the coat of arms on the armor of the pursuer. He realized these were the castle guards. Faye understood why they were chasing him and Lettuce. He asks why the guards did not say right away that they would follow them. One of the guards replies, they wanted to warn in advance, but the king forbade them to do so. Faye asks the guards to be sure the castle is safe. One of the guards says that Faye should not worry, the castle is as safe as always. Faye began to understand. The guard was deliberately reduced so that he and Lacias could pass safely. Everything was agreed upon by the king himself. Faye asks if there is anyone besides the guards. One of the guards reassures the boy nothing will happen, so he cannot worry and return to his own, although he remembers the girl and is already about to leave. Faye returns to Lettuce and apologizes for making her wait. Lettuce asks why this boy did not buy anything. Faye says what he saw turned out to be not as interesting as it seemed to him. Lettuce understands. Faye points to the building and says they should go there. Let's ask if there is something interesting there. Faye insists, come in and take a look. Faye smiles and says that the building is a great place to earn money. Lettuce replies that it is impossible. Faye asks why Lettuce thinks so. Lettuce reminds the boy Faye became a baroness and rose to the nobility. She says that the boy received this status in exchange for defending their country and its inhabitants from all kinds of terrible evil. Lettuce insists. Noblemen cannot earn money like that. Faye lowers her head and looks gloomy. Lettuce asks if she is okay. Suddenly a man in a hood appears. He smiles and says he finally found his target. Faye feels someone's magic and falls to the ground because his head starts to hurt terribly. Lettuce stops and asks Faye what happened. She was very worried about that boy. Faye tried to understand what happened. He heard that girl again. She asked if he was okay. The man replied that nothing terrible happened. The girl addressed him again and said she was not obliged to hide her abilities. Faye felt a power comparable to 5 imperial beasts. He raised his head and wondered who uses such might. The man in black clothes floated in the sky and laughed. The unknown man said that if he eats ice, he will gain new power. The unknown man says he can eat fire, ice, wind, thunder, and earth, but decides to start with ice. It was already quite late in the kingdom. Let's recall the journey to the royal estate. She was here for the first time and liked it very much. She would like to return here again and repeat everything. Then the girl turns around and asks Faye if he would like to return to this place. The boy was carrying boxes with her purchases. He replied that he really wants to return. Lettuce approaches him and is glad that he supports her. She asks if the boy wants to repeat the walk next time. Faye says he doesn't mind repeating. Then he adds he will agree only if the girl doesn't make a bunch of purchases. The guard approaches Faye and takes the boxes of groceries. He clutches his head and pushes that guy as if to say they can handle the rest themselves. Faye replies to him with the same look. Lettuce is outraged. He asks why he behaves as if Faye tortured him with her shopping trips. Lettuce approaches Faye and says goodbye to him. She asks if he will come to meet her again. She really wanted to repeat the walk. She had an incredible time. The man does not have time to answer. The girl jumps away from him and waves her hand one last time. Faye smiles and replies to her the same way. He asks the girl to take care of herself. Then Faye becomes more serious as soon as he senses someone's approach. He sharply glances to the side, then turns around completely. Faye remembered the moment when suddenly he had a sharp headache and fell to the ground. He realized someone had been watching them all this time. Faye went to the carriage and saw Trent. He reported that the carriage was already ready. Guy bowed and thanked the servant. Trent apologized for causing Faye so much trouble. He asked the guy to be more careful on the road. The stagecoach set off. Faye was riding in the stagecoach through the forest. He hissed a curse because he felt someone was watching him closely. He understood that it was an enemy. Faye guessed the same bandits, the ones who attacked him when he was expelled from the Bonnet family. Then the guy decided that it was not them because it would be too risky for them. He endlessly guessed who was pursuing him and tried to remember those who might want to harm him. Faye lived in the forest most of his life. Before starting school, he had no contact with people at all. Black tentacles appeared near the carriage. At first, they crawled inside the carriage and scared the man, then wrapped around the entire carriage, causing it to stop. The coachman was terribly frightened and the horses began to kick. Faye tried to understand what was happening. He had never seen such magic, so he could not say exactly who was attacking him. Faye jumped out of the carriage, but the black tentacles still clung to his legs. He tried to stop the man and prevent him from escaping. Faye decided to run away. He was terribly worried. He could not allow himself to be caught. Suddenly, black tentacles grabbed Faye by the legs. She could not move. At that moment, the boy fell to the ground and screamed in pain.